Nanon de Lartigues, Chapter 1. At a short distance from Libourne, the bright and bustling city mirrored in the swift waters of the Dordogne, between Fronsac and Saint-Michel-Riviere, once stood a pretty little white-walled, red-roofed village, half hidden by sycamores, lindens, and beeches. The high road from Libourne to Saint-André-de-Cubzac passed through the midst of its symmetrically arranged houses and formed the only landscape that they possessed. Behind one of the rows of houses, distant about 100 yards, wound the river, its width and swiftness at this point indicating the proximity of the sea. But the Civil War passed that way. First of all, it uprooted the trees, then depopulated the houses, which, being exposed to all its capricious fury, and being unable to fly like their occupants, simply crumbled and fell to pieces by the roadside, protesting in their way against the savagery of intestine warfare. But little by little the earth, which seems to have been created for the express purpose of serving as a grave of everything upon it, covered the dead bodies of these houses, which were once filled with joyous life. Lastly, the grass sprang up in this artificial soil, and the traveler who today wends his way along the solitary road is far from suspecting, as he sees one of the vast flocks which one encounters at every turn in the south cropping the grass upon the uneven surface, that sheep and shepherd are walking over the burial place of a whole village. But at the time of which we're speaking, that is to say about the month of May, 1650, the village in question lay along both sides of the road, which, like a mammoth artery, nourished it with luxuriant vegetation and overflowing life. The stranger who happened to pass along the road at that epoch would have taken pleasure in watching the peasants harness and unharness the horses from their carts. The fishermen along the hank pulling in their nets wherein the white and red fish of the Dordogne were dancing about, and the smith striking sturdy blows upon the anvil, and sending forth at every stroke of the hammer a shower of sparks which lighted up the forge. However, the thing which would most have delighted his soul, especially if his journeying had given him that appetite which had become a proverbial attribute of travelers, would have been a long, low building, about 500 yards outside the village, a building consisting of a ground floor and first floor only, exhaling a certain vapor through its chimney, and through its windows certain odors which indicated, even more surely than the figure of a golden calf painted upon a piece of red, iron, which creaked upon an iron rod set at the level of the first floor, that he had finally reached one of those hospitable establishments whose proprietors, in consideration of a certain modest recompense, undertake to restore the vigor of the tired wayfarer. But at the time of which we are speaking, that is to say about the month of May, 1650, the village in question lay along both sides of the road, which, like a mammoth artery, nourished it with luxuriant vegetation and overflowing life. The stranger who happened to pass along the road at that epoch would have taken pleasure in watching the peasants harness and unharness the horses from their carts. The fishermen along the hank pulling in their nets wherein the white and red fish of the Dordogne were dancing about, and the smith striking sturdy blows upon the anvil, and sending forth at every stroke of the hammer a shower of sparks which lighted up the forge. Will someone tell me why this hostelry of the Golden Calf was located 500 yards from the village, instead of taking up its natural position amid the smiling houses grouped on either side of the road? In the first place, because the landlord, notwithstanding the fact that his talents were hidden in this out-of-the-way corner of the world, was in culinary matters an artist of the first rank. Now, if he displayed a sign at any point between the beginning and the end of the two long lines of houses which formed the village, he ran the risk of being confounded with one of the wretched pothouse keepers whom he was forced to acknowledge as his confreres, but whom he could not bring himself to regard as his equals. While, on the contrary, by isolating himself, he more easily attracted the notice of connoisseurs, who, having once tasted the delicacies that came from his kitchen, would say to others, "When you are going from Libourne to Saint-André-de-Cubzac, or from Saint-André-de-Cubzac to Libourne, do not fail to stop for breakfast, dinner, or supper at the Golden Calf, just outside the little village of Matafaux." And the connoisseurs would follow this counsel, would leave the well content, and send other connoisseurs thither, so that the knowing Boniface gradually made his fortune, nor did that prevent him, strange to say, from continuing to maintain the high gastronomic reputation of his establishment, all of which goes to prove, as we have already said, that Master Biscaros was a true artist. On one of those lovely evenings in the month of May, when nature, already awakened from her winter's sleep in the south, is beginning to awake in the north, A denser vapor and more savory odor than usual was escaping from the chimneys and windows of the Golden Calf, while Master Biscaro's in person, dressed in white, according to the immemorial custom of sacrificers of all times and of all countries, was standing in the doorway, plucking with his august hands partridges and quail, destined to grace the festive hoard at one of those dainty repasts which he was so skillful in preparing, and which he was accustomed, as a result of his love for his art, to superintend personally to the smallest detail. The day was drawing to a close. The waters of the Dordogne, which, in one of the tortuous windings wherein its course abounds, turned aside from the road at this point, and washed the base of the little fort of Vaires, a fourth of a league away, were beginning to turn white beneath the dark foliage. A sense of tranquil melancholy overspread the landscape with the upspringing of the evening breeze. The laborers were toiling to their homes beside their horses, and the fishers with their dripping nets. The noises in the village died away, the hammer having struck its final stroke upon the anvil, bringing to its close another day. The nightingale began to raise his voice among the trees hard by. At the first notes which escaped from the throat of the feathered warbler, Master Biscaro's too began to sing, to accompany him no doubt. The result of this rivalry and of the interest of Master Biscaro's in the work he had in hand was that he did not perceive a small party of 6 horsemen, who appeared upon the outskirts of the village of Matafu and rode toward his inn. But an exclamation at one of the windows of the first floor, and the sudden noisy closing of that window caused the worthy innkeeper to raise his head. Thereupon he saw that the horseman at the head of the party was riding directly toward him. Directly is not altogether the appropriate word, and we hasten to correct ourselves, for the man halted every few steps, darting keen glances to right and left, scrutinizing bypaths, trees, and bushes, holding a carbine upon his knee with one hand, to be ready for attack or defense, and from time to time motioning to companions, who followed his movements in every point, to come on. Then he would venture forward a few steps, and the same maneuvers would be repeated. Biscaro's followed the horseman with his eyes, so deeply engrossed in his extraordinary mode of progression that he entirely forgot to detach from the fowl's body the bunch of feathers which he held between his thumb and forefinger. "That gentleman is looking for my house," said Biscaro's to himself. "He is short-sighted, doubtless, for my golden calf is freshly painted and the sign projects a good way. However, I'll place myself where he'll see me." And Master Biscaro's planted himself in the middle of the road, where he continued to pluck his partridge with much freedom and majesty of gesture. This step produced the anticipated result. The cavalier no sooner spied the worthy innkeeper than he rode up to him, and said, with a courteous salutation, "Your pardon, Master Biscaro's, but have you not seen here about a party of soldiers, who are friends of mine and should be looking for me? Soldiers is perhaps too strong a word. Gentlemen of the sword is better, or best of all, armed men, yes, armed men, that expresses my meaning. Have you seen a small party of armed men?" Biscaro's, flattered beyond measure to be called by his name, affably returned the salutation. He had not noticed that the stranger, with a single glance at the inn, had read the name and profession of the proprietor upon the sign, as he now read his identity upon his features. "As to armed men," he replied, after a moment's reflection, "I have seen only one gentleman and his squire, who stopped at my house about an hour ago." "Oh ho!" exclaimed the stranger, caressing his chin, which was almost beardless, although his face was already instinct with virility. "Oh ho! There's a gentleman and his squire here in your inn, and both armed, you say?" "Mon Dieu! Yes, monsieur. Shall I send word to him that you wish to speak to him?" "Would it be altogether becoming?" rejoined the stranger. "To disturb a person whom one doesn't know is somewhat too familiar usage. Perhaps, especially if the unknown is a person of rank. No, Master Biscaro's. Be good enough to describe him to me, and let it go at that. Or, better still, show him to me without letting him see me. It would be difficult to show him to you, monsieur, for he seems anxious to keep out of sight. He closed his window the moment you and your companions appeared upon the road. To describe him to you is a simpler matter. He is a slender youth, fair-haired and delicate, hardly more than 16. He seems to have just about enough strength to carry the little parlor sword which hangs at his baldric." The stranger knit his brow, as if searching his memory. "Ah, yes," said he, "I know whom you mean. A light-haired, effeminate young dandy, riding a Barbary horse, and followed by an old squire, stiff as a knave of spades. He's not the man I seek. Ah, he's not the man Monsieur seeks. Biscaros repeated. No. Very good. Pending his arrival whom Monsieur seeks, as he cannot fail to pass this way. There being no other road, I trust that Monsieur and his friends will enter my humble inn and take some refreshment. No, I have simply to thank you and to ask what time it might be. 6 o'clock is just striking on the village clock, Monsieur. Don't you hear the loud tones of the bell? 'Tis well. Now, Monsieur Biscaros, one last service. With pleasure. Tell me, please, how I can procure a boat and boatman. To cross the river? No, to take a sail upon the river. Nothing easier. The fisherman who supplies me with fish. Are you fond of fish, monsieur? Queried Biscaros, parenthetically, returning to his first idea of persuading the stranger to sup beneath his roof. It's not the most toothsome of delicacies, monsieur. However, when properly seasoned, it's not to be despised. I always have excellent fish, monsieur. I congratulate you, Master Biscaros. But let us return to the man who supplies you. To be sure, at this hour his day's work is at an end, and he is probably dining. You can see his boat from here, moored to the willows yonder, just below the large elm. His house is hidden in the osier bed. You will surely find him at table. Thanks, Master Biscaros, thanks, said the stranger, motioning to his companions to follow him. He rode rapidly away toward the clump of trees and knocked at the door of the little cabin. The door was opened by the fisherman's wife. As Master Biscaros had said, the fisherman was at table. Take your oars, said the horseman, and follow me. There's a crown to be earned. The fisherman rose with a degree of precipitation that was most eloquent of the hard bargain's mind. Host of the Golden Calf was wont to drive. Do you wish to go down the river to Vayres? He asked. No, simply to go out into midstream and remain there a few moments. The fisherman stared at his customer's exposition of this strange whim, but as there was a crown at the end of it, and as he could see, some 20 yards away, the dark forms of the other horsemen, he made no objection, thinking that any indication of unwillingness on his part might lead to the use of force, and that in the struggle he would lose the proffered recompense. He therefore made haste to say to the stranger that he was at his service, with his boat and his oars. The little troop thereupon at once guided their horses toward the river, and, while their leader kept on the water's edge, halted at the top of the bank, in such a position, as if they feared to be taken by surprise, that they could see in all directions. They had an uninterrupted view of the plain behind them, and could also cover the embarkation about to take place at their feet. Thereupon the stranger, who was a tall, light-haired young man, pale and rather thin, nervous in his movements, and with a bright, intelligent face, although there were dark rings around his blue eyes, and a cynical expression played about his lips. The stranger, we say, examined his pistols with particular attention, slung his carbine over his shoulder, made sure that his long rapier moved easily in its sheath, and then gazed attentively at the opposite shore, a broad expanse of plain, intersected by a path which ran in a straight line from the bank to the hamlet of Issen. The dark church spire and the smoke from the houses could be distinguished through the golden evening haze. Also on the other bank, scarcely an eighth of a league distant, stood the little fort of Vayres. Well, said the stranger, beginning to lose patience, and addressing his companions on the bank, is he coming? Can you see him anywhere, to right or left, before or behind? I think, said one of the men, that I can make out a dark group on the Issen road, but I am not quite sure for the sons of my eyes. Wait, yes, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 men led by a lace hat and blue cloak. It must be the man we expect, attended by an escort for greater safety. He has the right to bring an escort, rejoined the stranger phlegmatically. Come and take my horse, Ferguson. The man to whom this command was addressed, in a half-familiar, half-imperative tone, obeyed at once and rode down the bank. Meanwhile, the stranger alighted, and when the other joined him, threw his bridle over his arm and prepared to go aboard the boat. Look you, said Ferguson, laying his hand upon his arm, no useless foolhardiness, Cavaignac. If you see the slightest suspicious movement on your man's part, begin by putting a bullet through his brain. You see that the crafty villain has brought a whole squadron with him. True, but not so strong as ours. So we have the advantage in numbers as well as in courage, and need fear nothing. Ah, their heads are beginning to show. Gad, what are they going to do? Said Ferguson. They can't procure a boat. Ah, faith, there's one there as by magic. It's my cousin, the Isin ferryman, said the fisherman, who evinced a keen interest in these preliminaries, and was in terror lest a naval battle was about to take place between his own craft and his cousin's. Good. There the blue coat steps aboard, said Ferguson, and alone by my soul, strictly according to the terms of the treaty. Let us not keep him waiting, said the stranger, and leaping into the skiff, he motioned to the fisherman to take his station. Be careful, Roland, said Ferguson, recurring to his prudent counsel. The river is broad. Don't go too near the other shore, to be greeted with a volley of musket balls that we can't return. Keep on this side of the center if possible. He whom Ferguson called now Roland, and again Cavaignac, and who answered to both names, doubtless because one was a name by which he was baptized, and the other his family name, or his nom de guerre, nodded assentingly. Never fear, he said. I was just thinking of that. It's all very well for them who have nothing to take rash chances, but this business promises too well for me foolishly to run the risk of losing all the fruit of it. So if there is any imprudence committed on this occasion, it won't be by me. Off we go, boatmen. The fisherman cast off his moorings, thrust his long pole into the watergrass, and the boat began to move away from the bank, at the same time that the Isin ferryman's skiff put off from the opposite shore. There was, near the center of the stream, a little stockade, consisting of 3 stakes surmounted by a white flag, which served to point out to the long lighters going down the Dordogne the location of a dangerous cluster of rocks. When the water was running low, the black, slippery crest of the reef could be seen above the surface. But at this moment, when the Dordogne was full, the little flag and a slight ripple in the water alone indicated its presence. The 2 boatmen seemed by a common impulse to have fixed upon that spot as a convenient one for the interview between the 2 flags of truce, and both pulled in that direction. The ferryman reached the flag first, and in accordance with his passenger's orders made his skiff fast to one of the rings in the stockade. At that moment the fisherman turned to his passenger to take his orders, and was not a little surprised to find a masked man, closely wrapped in his cloak. Upon that discovery his feeling of dread, which had never left him, redoubled, and his voice trembled as he asked this strange personage what course he wished him to take. "Make your boat fast to yonder piece of wood," said Cavaignac, pointing to one of the stakes, "and as near Monsieur's boat as possible." The boatman obeyed, and the 2 craft, brought close together by the current, permitted the plenipotentiaries to hold the following conference. Chapter 2. "What? You wear a mask, monsieur?" exclaimed the newcomer in a tone of surprise not unmixed with vexation. He was a stout man of some 55 to 58 years, with a stern, glaring eye of a bird of prey and a grisly mustache in royale. Although he wore no mask, he concealed his hair and his features as much as possible beneath a huge lace hat, and his figure and his clothes beneath a blue cloak of ample proportions. Cavaignac, upon obtaining a view at close quarters of the individual who addressed him, could not restrain an involuntary movement of surprise. Well, monsieur, what's the matter?" demanded he of the blue cloak. "Nothing, monsieur. I nearly lost my balance." "I believe that you did me the honor of addressing me. What were you saying, pray?" "I asked you why you were masked." "That is a plain question," said the young man, "and I will reply with equal frankness. I am masked in order to conceal my face." "Then it is a face that I know?" "I think not, but having seen it once you might know it again later, and that, in my opinion, would be utterly useless. I should say that you were quite as outspoken as myself." "Yes, when outspokenness can do me no harm. Does your frankness go so far as to lead you to disclose the secrets of others?" "Why not, if such disclosure can be of advantage to me? It's a singular profession that you practice." "Dame, one does what one can do, monsieur. I have been in succession lawyer, doctor, soldier, and partisan. You see that I am not likely to go begging for a trade." "What are you now?" "Your humble servant," said the young man, bowing respectfully. "Have you the letter in question? Have you the blank signature?" "Here it is." "Shall we make the exchange?" "One moment, monsieur," said the stranger in the blue cloak. "Your conversation is delightful to me, and I should be sorry to lose my enjoyment of it so soon." "Good lack! Monsieur, It is quite at your service, as I myself am, rejoined Cavaignac. Let us talk by all means, if it is agreeable to you. Shall I step into your boat, or do you prefer to come aboard mine, so that our boatman may be out of earshot in the other boat? Useless, monsieur. You speak some foreign tongue, no doubt? I can speak Spanish. And let's talk in Spanish, then, if you please. By all means. What motive, continued the gentleman, adopting from that moment the idiom agreed upon, led you to inform the Duc d'Epernon of the infidelity of the lady in question? I was desirous to be of service to that eminent nobleman, and to get into his good graces. Have you any ill will to Mademoiselle de Lartigues? Ill will? By no manner of means. On the contrary, I must admit that I am under some obligation to her, and I should be extremely sorry were any mishap to befall her. Then Monsieur le Baron de Canoles is your enemy? I never saw him. I know him only by reputation, and I must say that he is said to be a gallant knight and worthy gentleman. I am to understand that your action is not induced by hatred of any person? Go to. If I had a grievance against Baron de Canoles, I should challenge him to exchange shots or sword thrusts with me, and he is too much a man ever to decline an invitation of that kind. In that case, I must recur to the reason you have given me. I think you can do no better. Very good. I understand that you have the letter which proves Mademoiselle de Lartigues to be unfaithful. Here it is. No offense, but this is the second time I have shown it to you. The older gentleman glanced sadly from afar at the dainty paper, through which he could see the written characters. The young man slowly unfolded the letter. You recognize the writing, do you not? Yes. Then give me the blank signature, and you shall have the letter. In a moment. Will you allow me to ask you a question? Ask it, monsieur. The young man tranquilly folded the paper again and replaced it in his pocket. How did you procure the letter? I am quite willing to tell you. I am listening. You know that the somewhat extravagant government of the Duc d'Epernon has aroused a strong feeling against him in Guyenne? Very well, go on. You know that the frightfully stingy government of Monsieur de Mazarin has aroused a tremendously strong feeling against him in the capital? What have Monsieur de Mazarin and Monsieur d'Epernon to do with the matter? One moment. These two strongly contrasted governments have produced a state of things much resembling a general war, in which everyone has a share. At this moment, Monsieur de Mazarin is fighting for the Queen. You are fighting for the King. The coadjutor is fighting for Monsieur de Beaufort. Monsieur de Beaufort is fighting for Madame de Montbazon. Monsieur La Rochefoucauld is fighting for Madame de Longueville. Monsieur le Duc d'Orleans is fighting for Mademoiselle Soyen. The Parliament is fighting for the people. Lastly, Monsieur de Condé, who is fighting for France, has been imprisoned. Now I, who have no great stake to gain by fighting for the Queen, for the King, for the coadjutor, for Monsieur de Beaufort, for Madame de Montbazon, for Madame de Longueville, for Mademoiselle Soyen, for the people, or for France, conceive the scheme of espousing no party whatever, but of following the one which I feel inclined to follow at the moment. Thus with me it is a question of expediency pure and simple. What say you to the idea? It is ingenious, certainly. Consequently, I have levied an army. You can see it drawn up yonder on the bank of the Dordogne. 5 men? Nonsense. That's one more than you have yourself. It doesn't look well, therefore, for you to treat it with contempt. Very ill-clad, continued the older man, who was in ill humor, and for that reason inclined to be censorious. True, rejoined his interlocutor. They somewhat resemble companions of Falstaff. Falstaff, by the way, is an English gentleman of my acquaintance. But tonight they will be newly equipped, and if you fall in with them tomorrow, you will admit that they are pretty fellows. Let us return to yourself. I am not concerned with your men. Very well. As I was saying, in the course of my warfare on my own account, we fell in with the tax collector of this district, who was going from village to village, rounding out his Majesty's purse. So long as there was a single stiver uncollected, we did escort duty for him faithfully, and I confess that, as I watched his money bags filling, I was strongly tempted to join the king's faction. But the infernal confusion that reigned everywhere, together with a fit of spleen against Monsieur de Mazarin, and the complaints that we heard on all sides against Monsieur d'Epernon, brought us to our senses. We concluded that there was much to be said in favor of the justice of the prince's cause, and we embraced it with ardor. The collector completed his round of visits at the little house which stands by itself yonder among the poplars and sycamores. "Nanon's house," muttered the other. "Yes, I see it. We watched until he came out. We followed him as we had been doing for 5 days. We crossed the Dordogne with him just below Saint Michel, and when we were in midstream, I told him of our conversion politically and requested him, with all the courtesy of which I am capable, to turn over to us the cash in his possession. Would you believe, monsieur, that he refused? Thereupon, my comrade searched him, and as he was shrieking away to cause scandal, my lieutenant, a resourceful rascal, you see him yonder, in a red cloak, holding my horse, reflected that the water, by intercepting the air currents, interfered with the continuity of sound. That is an axiom in physics which I, as a physician, understood and applauded. The author of the suggestion thereupon bent the recalcitrant tax collector's head over toward the river and held a foot no more under water. As a matter of fact, he ceased to shout, or, to put it more accurately, we ceased to hear him. We were able, therefore, to seize in the name of the princes all the money in his possession and the correspondence which had been entrusted to him. I gave the money to my soldiers, who, as you justly observed, need be newly equipped, and I kept the papers, this one among others. It seems that the worthy collector acted as Mercury for Mademoiselle de Lartigues. Indeed, muttered the old gentleman, he was a creature of Nanon's, if I mistake not. What became of the wretch? Ah, you will see whether we did well to dip the wretch, as you call him, in the river. Why, except for that precaution, he would have aroused the whole country. Fancy, when we took him out of the water, although he had been there hardly 1/4 of an hour, he was dead with rage. You plunge him in again, no doubt? As you say. But if the messenger was drowned, I didn't say that he was drowned. Let us not haggle over words. If the messenger is dead. Oh, as to that, he's dead enough. Monsieur de Canolles will not have received the letter, of course, and consequently will not keep the appointment. Oh, one moment. I make war on powers, not on private individuals. Monsieur de Canolles received a duplicate of the letter making the appointment, but as I consider that the autographed manuscript was of some value, I retained it. What will he think when he fails to recognize the writing? That the person who hungers for a sight of him has employed another hand, as a measure of precaution. The stranger-eyed Cavaignac, in evident admiration of such unbounded impudence, combined with such perfect self-possession, he was determined, if possible, to find some means of frightening the reckless swashbuckler. What about the government, he said, and the investigations that may be set on foot? Do you never think of that? Investigations? Rejoined the younger man with a laugh. Oh, Monsieur Épernon has many other things to do besides investigate. And then, did I not tell you that I did what I did for the purpose of obtaining his favor? He would be ungrateful indeed if he didn't bestow it on me. I don't altogether understand, said the other, satirically, how it ever occurred to you, who have, by your own admission, taken up the cause of the princes, to do Monsieur d'Épernon a service. And yet it's the simplest thing in the world. An inspection of the papers found upon the collector convinced me of the purity of the king's intentions. His Majesty is entirely justified in my eyes, and Monsieur le Duc d'Épernon is in right 1,000 times over as against his subordinates. That, therefore, is the just cause, and thereupon I embrace the just cause. Here's a scoundrel whom I will have hanged if he ever falls into my hands, growled the old gentleman, pulling savagely at the ends of his bristly mustache. I beg your pardon, said Cavaignac, winking under his mask. I said nothing. Let me ask you a question. What do you propose to do with the signature in blank which you demand? Deuce take me if I've made up my mind. I ask for a signature in blank, because it is the most convenient thing, the easiest to carry, and the most elastic. It is probable that I shall keep it for some great emergency, but it is possible that I may throw it away on the first whim that comes to my mind. Perhaps I may present to you in person before the end of the week. Perhaps it will not come back to you for 3 or 4 months, and then with 12 or more endorsers, like a piece of commercial paper. But never fear, I shall not use it for any purpose for which you, and I need blush. Noble blood counts for something, after all. You are of noble blood. Yes, monsieur, the very noblest. In that case I will have him broken on the wheel, muttered the unknown. That's the service his blank signature will do him. Have you decided to give me the signature in blank? asked Cavaignac. "I must," was the reply. "I don't force you to do it. Let us understand each other. What I propose is an exchange. Keep your paper if you choose, and I will keep mine. The letter, the signature," and he held out the letter with one hand, while he cocked a pistol with the other. "Don't disturb the repose of your pistol," said the stranger, throwing open his cloak, "for I have pistols too, and they are all loaded. Fair play on both sides. Here's your signature." The exchange of documents was effected without further parley, and each of the parties examined that which was handed to him, carefully and in silence. "Now, monsieur," said Cavaignac, "in which direction do you go?" "I must cross to the right bank." "And I to the left. How shall we arrange it?" "My men are where you propose to go, and yours where I propose to go." "Why? Nothing could be simpler. Send my men over to me in your boat, and I will send yours over in mine. You have an inventive mind, and one that works very quickly. I was born to command an army." "And so you do." "Ah, true. I had forgotten," said the young man. The stranger motioned to the ferryman to cast off his boat, and pulled to the opposite shore in the direction of the clump of woods which reached to the road. The young man, who was perhaps expecting some treachery, stood half erect to look after him, with his hand still resting on the butt of his pistol, ready to fire at the least suspicious movement on the stranger's part. But the latter did not even deign to notice the distrust of which he was the object, and, turning his back on the young man with real or affected indifference, began to read the letter, and was soon entirely engrossed in its contents. "Remember the hour," Cavaignac called after him. 8 o'clock this evening." The stranger made no reply, and did not seem to have heard. "Ah!" said Cavaignac to himself, caressing the butt of his pistol. "To think that if I chose, I might throw open a succession to the government of Guyenne and stop the civil war. But with the Duc d'Epernon dead, what good would a signature in blanc do me? And with the civil war at an end, what should I live on? Upon my word, there are times when I believe I am going mad. Vive le Duc d'Epernon and the civil war. Come, boatmen, to your oars, and pull to the other shore. We must not keep the worthy man waiting for his escort." In a few moments Cavaignac approached the left bank of the Dordogne, just as the old gentleman was sending Ferguson and his 5 bandits over to him in the ferryman's boat. As he did not choose to be less prompt than he ordered his boatman to take the strangers for men in his boat and put them ashore on the other bank. In midstream the two boats met, and the occupants saluted one another courteously as they passed on toward the point where their respective leaders were awaiting them. The old gentleman thereupon, with his escort, disappeared among the trees which stretched from the river bank to the highroad, and Cavaignac, at the head of his army, took the path leading to Issy. Chapter 3. Half an hour after the scene we have described, the same window in Master Biscaro's hostelry, which had been closed so suddenly, was cautiously reopened, and a young man of some 16 or 18 years, dressed in black, with sleeves puffed at the wrists, in the fashion of that day, rested his elbows on the window-sill, after carefully scrutinizing the road to right and left. A shirt of the finest linen protruded proudly from his doublet, and fell in wavy folds over his beribboned small clothes. His small, slender hand, a true thoroughbred hand, toyed impatiently with his buckskin gloves, embroidered along the seams. A pearl-gray felt hat, surmounted by a magnificent blue feather, shaded his long, golden chestnut locks, which form a marvelously fitting frame for an oval face, with fair complexion, rosy lips, and black eyebrows. But truth compels us to state that this attractive ensemble, which was well adapted to make the youth one of the most charming of cavaliers, was for the moment ever so little clouded by an expression of ill humor, caused no doubt by a season of profitless waiting. For he gazed with dilated eye along the road, which was already swimming in evening mist. In his impatience, he struck his left hand with his gloves. At the sound, the landlord, who was plucking his last partridge, raised his head and said, removing his cap, "At what hour will you sup, my young sir? We are only awaiting your orders to serve you. You know that I do not sup alone, but am awaiting a friend. When you see him coming, you may serve the supper." "Ah, monsieur," rejoined Master Biscaros, "I wouldn't presume to send you your friend, for he is certainly free to come or not, but it is a very bad habit to keep people waiting. He has no such habit, and I am much surprised at his tardiness." I am something more than surprised, monsieur. I am deeply grieved, for the joint will be burned. Take it off the spit. Then it will be cold. Put another to the fire. It won't be cooked. In that case, my friend, do as you please, said the youth, unable, notwithstanding his ill humor, to refrain from smiling at the innkeeper's despair. I entrust the matter to your supreme wisdom. There is no wisdom, not even King Solomon's own, that would make a warmed-over dinner eatable. Having propounded that axiom, which Boileau was to express in verse 20 years later, Master Biscaros, shaking his head sadly, entered the inn. Thereupon the youth, as if to cheat his impatience, drew back into the chamber, and was heard for a moment or two stamping noisily back and forth across the floor. But almost immediately, thinking that he heard horses' footsteps in the distance, he rushed to the window again. "At last!" he cried. "There he is! God be praised!" As he spoke, the head of a mounted man appeared beyond the thicket, where the nightingale was singing, to whose melodious notes the young man seemed to pay no attention, doubtless because of his intense preoccupation. To his great astonishment, he waited in vain for the horseman to come out upon the road, for he turned to the right and rode in among the bushes, where his hat soon disappeared, an unmistakable indication that he had alighted. A moment later the watcher saw through the branches, as they were cautiously put aside, a gray helmet, and the last rays of the setting sun were reflected on a musket barrel. The young man remained at his window, lost in thought. Evidently the man hiding in the thicket was not the friend he expected. An impatient expression which darkened his mobile features gave place to an expression of curiosity. Soon a second hat appeared beside the first, and the young man drew back out of sight. The same gray helmet, the same glistening musket barrel, the same maneuvering in the thicket. The new arrival addressed some words to the other, which the watcher could not hear because of the distance, and, in consequence doubtless of the information he received, he plunged into the hedge which ran parallel to the thicket, crouched behind a rock, and waited. From his elevated position, the young man could see his hat above the rock. Beside the hat gleamed a luminous point. It was the end of the musket barrel. A feeling of terror took possession of the young gentleman's mind, and he drew back farther and farther as he watched. "Oh ho!" he thought. "I wonder if they had designs on me and the 1,000 louis to first have with me. But no, for even if Rick Hahn comes, so that I can go on this evening, I am going to Libourne, and not to Saint Andre de Cubzac, and so shall not pass the spot where those villains are in ambush. If my old Pompey were here, I would consult him. But what's this? If I'm not mistaken, yes, on my word, there are 2 more men. Gad, this is every appearance of an ambuscade in form." He stepped still farther back, for it was true that at that moment 2 other horsemen appeared at the same point, but only one of these 2 wore the gray helmet. The other, astride a powerful black horse, and wrapped in the fold of an ample cloak, wore a hat trimmed with gold lace and adorned with white feather, and beneath the cloak, as the evening breeze blew aside, could be seen an abundance of rich embroidery upon a reddish doublet. One would have said that the day was prolonging itself in order to light this scene, for the sun's last rays, as the luminary came forth from behind a bank of those dark clouds which sometimes stretch so picturesquely along the horizon at sundown, suddenly set ablaze 1,000 rubies in the windows of a pretty little house, situated 100 yards or less from the river, and which the young man would not otherwise have noticed, as it was in a great measure concealed by trees. This additional supply of light enabled him to see in the first place that the spies were watching the end of the village street and the little house with the shining windows, looking from one to the other. Secondly, that the gray helmet seemed to have the greatest respect for the white feather. And lastly, that one of the windows in question was thrown open, and a woman appeared upon the balcony, looked about for a moment, as if she too were expecting someone, then re-entered the house as if she wished to avoid being seen. As she disappeared, the sun sank behind the hill, and as it sank, the ground floor of the house was immersed in darkness, and the light, gradually abandoning the windows, ascended to the slate roof, to disappear at last, after playing for a moment with a weather vane consisting of a sheaf of golden arrows. In the facts we have detailed, there was ample material for any intelligent mind to build up a structure of probabilities, if not of certainties. It was probable that the men were watching the isolated house, upon the balcony of which a woman had shown herself for an instant. It was probable that the woman and the men were expecting the arrival of one and the same person, but with very different intentions. It was probable that this person was to come from the village, and consequently to pass the inn, which was about halfway between the village and the thicket. As the thicket was about halfway between the inn and the house, it was probable that the horseman with the white feather was the leader of the horsemen with gray helmets, and from the eagerness with which he stood up in his stirrups, in order to see farther, it was probable that he was jealous and was watching his own interest. Just as the young man was concluding this chain of reasoning, the links of which fell naturally together in his mind, the door of his apartment opened and Master Biscaros appeared. "My dear host," said the young man, without giving him time to explain the purpose of his visit, a purpose which he guessed, however, "come hither and tell me, if my question is not impertinent, whose is the small house which I see yonder, a white speck among the poplars and sycamores?" The landlord followed with his eyes the direction in which the speaker's index finger pointed and scratched his head. "Faith," he replied, with a smile which he tried to render cunning, "sometimes it belongs to one person, sometimes to another. It's yours. If you have any reason for seeking solitude, whether you wish to conceal yourself or simply conceal someone else." The young man blushed. "But who lives there today?" he asked. "A young lady who passes herself off for a widow, and whom the ghost of her first, and sometimes of her second husband, comes to visit from time to time. But there's one remarkable thing about it, and that is that the two ghosts seem to have an understanding with each other and never return at the same time." "Since when," asked the young man with a smile, "has the fair widow occupied this house, which is so convenient for ghosts?" "About 2 months. She keeps very much to herself, and no one, I think, can boast of having seen her during that time, for she goes out very rarely and always heavily veiled. A little maid, a fascinating creature, on my word. Comes here every morning to order the meals of the day, and I send them to the house. She receives the dishes in the vestibule, pays handsomely for them, and shuts the door in the waiter's face. This evening, for example, there is a banquet on hand, and the partridge and quail you saw me plucking are for her." "Whom does she entertain tonight?" "One of the two ghosts I told you of, no doubt. Have you ever seen these ghosts?" "Yes, but only passing along the road after sunset or before daylight. Nevertheless, I am sure that you have noticed them, dear Monsieur Biscaros, for from the first word you spoke, I could see that you are a close observer. Come, what have you noticed in their appearance?" "One is the ghost of a man of some 60 to 65 years, and that one I take to be the first husband, for it goes and comes like a ghost sure of the priority of its rights. The other is the ghost of a young man of 26 or 28, and this one is more timid and has the appearance of a soul in torment. So I would swear that it's the ghost of the second husband. At what hour is the supper to be served tonight?" 8 o'clock. "It is half after 7, said the young man, drawing from his fob a dainty little watch which he had already consulted several times. "You have no time to lose." "Oh, it will be ready, never fear. But I came up to speak about your own, and to tell you that I have begun it all anew. So try, now, as your friend has delayed so long, to keep him away for another hour." "Look you, my dear host," said the young gentleman, with the air of a man to whom the important question of a meal served at the proper moment was a secondary matter, "don't be disturbed about our supper, whenever the person whom I expect arrives, for we have much to talk about. If the supper isn't ready, we will talk first. If it is ready, we will talk afterward. In good sooth, monsieur, you are a very accommodating gentleman, and since you are content to leave the matter in my hands, you shall not be disappointed. Make your mind easy on that score." Whereupon Master Biscaros made a low bow, to which the young man replied with a nod and left the room. "Now," said the young man to himself, resuming his station at the window with renewed interest, "I understand the whole affair. The lady is expecting somebody who is to come from Libourne, and the men in the bushes propose to accost him before he has time to knock at her door." At that instant, as if to confirm the supposition of our sagacious observer, he heard the hoof-beats of a horse at his left. His eye instantly sought the thicket to observe the attitude of the men in ambush there. Although the darkness was beginning to obscure the different objects, it seemed to him that some of the men put aside the branches, while the others stood up to look over the rock, all alike preparing for a movement, which had every appearance of being an aggressive one. At the same time, a sharp click, like the cocking of a musket, reached his ear thrice and made him shudder. He at once turned in the opposite direction to try and discern the person whose safety was menaced by that murderous sound, and spied a young man trotting briskly along upon a graceful, well-shaped horse. A handsome fellow he was, head erect, nose in air, and hand on hip, wearing a short cloak, lined with white satin, thrown gracefully over his right shoulder. Seen from a distance, he seemed to have a refined, poetic, joyous face. At closer quarters, it was seen to be a face with pure outlines, bright, clear complexion, keen eyes, lips slightly parted by the habit of smiling, a soft black mustache, and fine, white teeth. A lordly way of twirling his switch, accompanied by a soft whistle, like that affected by the dandies of the epoch, following the fashion set by Monsieur Gaston d'Olens, was not lacking to make of the newcomer a perfect cavalier, according to the laws of good form then in vogue at the court of France, which was beginning to set the fashion for all the courts of Europe. 50 paces behind him, mounted upon a horse whose gait he regulated by that of his master's, rode an extremely consequential, high and mighty valet, who seemed to occupy a no less distinguished station among servants than his master among gentlemen. The comely youth watching from the window of the inn, too young, doubtless, to look on in cold blood at such a scene as seemed imminent, could not restrain a shudder as he reflected that the two paragons who were approaching, with such absolute indifference and sense of security, would, in all probability, be shot down when they reached the spot where their foes were lying in ambush. A decisive conflict seemed to take place between the timidity natural at his age and his love for his neighbor. At last, a generous sentiment carried the day, and as the gallant cavalier was riding by in front of the inn, without even looking toward it, the young man obeyed a sudden, irresistible impulse, leaned from the window, and cried, "Ho, monsieur, stop a moment, please, for I have something of importance to say to you." At the sound of the voice and the words which it uttered, the horseman raised his head, and seeing the young man at the window, stopped his horse with a movement of his hand which would have done honor to the best of squires. "Don't stop your horse, monsieur, but ride toward me unconcernedly, as if you knew me." The traveler hesitated a second, but realizing that he had to do with a gentleman of engaging countenance and pleasant manners, he removed his hat and rode forward, smiling. "Here I am at your service, monsieur," he said. "What can I do for you?" "Come still nearer, monsieur," continued he at the window, "or what I have to tell you cannot be told aloud. Put on your hat, for we must make them think that we are old acquaintances, and that you are coming to this inn to see me." "But I don't understand, monsieur," said the traveler. "You will understand directly. Meanwhile, put on your hat. Good. Now come nearer. Give me your hand. That's it. Delighted to see you. Now listen. Do not ride on beyond this inn, or you are lost." "What's the matter?" "Really, you terrify me," said the traveler with a smile. "The matter is that you are on your way to yonder little house where we see the light. Are you not?" The horseman started. "Well, on the road to that house, at the bend in the road, in yonder dark thicket, for men are lying in wait for you." "Oh ho!" exclaimed the traveler, gazing with all his eyes at the young man, who was quite pale. "Indeed, you are sure. I saw them ride up, one after another, get down from their horses and hide, some behind the trees, others behind rocks. Lastly, when you rode out of the village just now, I heard them cock their muskets." "The devil!" exclaimed the traveler, beginning to take alarm. "Yes, monsieur, it's just as I tell you," continued the young man at the window. "If it were only not quite so dark you could see them, and perhaps recognize them." "Oh, I have no need to see them. I know perfectly well who they are. But who told you that I was going to that house, monsieur, and that it is I they are watching for?" "I guessed it. You are a very charming Oedipus." "Thanks. Ah, they propose to shoot me. How many of them are assembled for that praiseworthy purpose?" "For one of whom seemed the leader. He is older than the others, and he?" "Yes, as well as I could judge from here." "Does he stoop?" "He is round-shouldered, wears an embroidered doublet, white plume, brown cloak. His gestures are infrequent but imperative." "As I thought, it's the Duc d'Epernon." "The Duc d'Epernon. Well, here I am telling you my business," said the traveler with a laugh. I never do so with others, but no matter, you have done me so great a service that I don't care so much what I say to you. How are the men dressed who are with him? Gray helmets. Just so, they are staff bearers. Become musket bearers for today. In my honor, thanks. Now, do you know what you ought to do, my young gentleman? No. But tell me your opinion, and if what I ought to do can be of any service to you, I am ready in advance to undertake it. You have weapons? Why, yes, I have a sword. You have your servant? Of course. But he is not here. I sent him to meet someone whom I expect. Very well. You ought to lend me a hand. To do what? To charge the villains and make them and their leader beg for mercy. Are you mad, monsieur? Cried the young man, in a tone which showed that he was not in the least inclined for such an expedition. Indeed, I ask your pardon, said the traveler. I forgot that the affair had no interest for you. Turning to his servant, who had halted when his master halted, he said, Come here, Castorin. At the same time, he put his hand to his holsters, as if to make sure that his pistols were in good condition. Ah, monsieur, cried the young man at the window, putting out his arms as if to stop him. Monsieur, in heaven's name, do not risk your life in such an adventure. Rather come into the inn, and thereby avoid arousing the suspicion of the men who are waiting for you. Consider that the honor of a woman is at stake. You are right, rejoined the horseman, although in this case it's not her honor precisely, but her material welfare. Castor, my good fellow, he added, addressing his servant, who had joined him, we will go no farther just now. What? Cried Castorin, almost as disappointed as his master. What does monsieur say? I say that Mademoiselle Francinet will have to do without the pleasure of seeing you this evening, as we shall pass the night at the Golden Calf. Go in, therefore, order supper for me, and a bed to be got ready. As he doubtless saw that Monsieur Castorin proposed to make some rejoinder, he accompanied his last words with a movement of the head, which effectually precluded any more extended discussion. Castorin at once passed through the gate, crestfallen, and without venturing to say another word. The traveler looked after him for an instant. Then, after reflecting for another instant, seemed to have made up his mind what course to adopt. He alighted from his horse, passed through the gate on the heels of his lackey, over whose arm he threw his rein, entered the inn, and in 2 bounds was at the door of the room occupied by the young gentleman, who, when his door was suddenly thrown open, made an involuntary movement of surprise mingled with alarm, which the newcomer could not detect because of the darkness. And so, said the latter, approaching the young man with a jovial air, and cordially pressing a hand which was not offered him, it's a settled fact that I owe you my life. Oh, monsieur, you exaggerate the service I have done you, said the young man, stepping back. No modesty, it's as I say. I know the Duke, and he's an infernally brutal fellow. As for you, you are a model of perspicacity, a perfect phoenix of Christian charity. But tell me, my obliging and sympathetic friend, if you carried your thoughtfulness so far as to send word to the house. To what house? Pardon you, to the house where I was going, the house where I am expected. No, said the young man. I did not think of it, I confess, and had I thought of it, I had no way to do it. I have been here barely 2 hours myself, and I know no one in the house. The devil! Exclaimed the traveler with an anxious expression. Poor Nanon! If only nothing happens to her. Nanon de Lartigues! Exclaimed the young man in amazement. Upon my word! Are you a sorcerer? Said the traveler. You see men lying in wait by the roadside, and you divine whom they are waiting for. I mention a Christian name, and you divine the family name. Explain yourself at once, or I denounce you, and have you condemned to death at the stake by the Parliament of Bordeaux. Ah, but you surely will agree that one need not be very cunning to have solved that problem. Once you had named the Duc d'Epernon as your rival, it was plain enough that if you named any Nanon whatsoever, it must be the beautiful, wealthy, and clever Nanon de Lartigues, by whom the Duke is bewitched, so they say, and who really governs in his province. The result being that throughout Guyenne, she is almost as bitterly detested as he is himself. And you were on your way to visit that woman? The young man added, reproachfully, Faith, yes, I confess it. and as I have called her name, I won't deny her. Besides, Nanon is misunderstood and slandered. She is a charming girl, faithful to her promises so long as she finds agreeable to keep them, and devoted to the man she loves, so long as she loves him. I was to sup with her this evening, but the Duke has upset the saucepan. Would you like me to present you to her tomorrow? Deuce take it. The Duke must return to Agen sooner or later. Thanks, returned the young gentleman dryly. I know Mademoiselle de Lartigues by name only, and I have no desire for any further acquaintance with her. Well, you are wrong, Morbleu. Nanon is a good person to know in every way. The young man's brows contracted. Oh, I beg your pardon, said the astonished traveler, but I thought that at your age— I know that I am of an age at which such suggestions are ordinarily accepted, replied the other, noticing the bad effect his prudery seemed to have produced, and I would gladly accept, were it not that I am simply a bird of passage here, and am compelled to continue my journey tonight. Pardieu, surely you will not go until I know the name of the gentle knight who so courteously saved my life. The young man hesitated for a moment before he replied, I am the Vicomte de Cams. Aha, said his companion. I have heard of a lovely Vicomtesse de Cams, who has large estates near Bordeaux, and is a close friend of Madame la Princesse. She is a kinswoman of mine, said the young man hastily. Faith, Viscount, I congratulate you, for they say that she is charming beyond compare. I hope you will present me to her, if the opportunity ever occurs. I am Baron de Canoles, captain in the Nivelles regiment, and at present enjoying a leave of absence which Monsieur Duc d'Epernon was pleased to grant me, at the recommendation of Mademoiselle de Lartigues. Baron de Canoles, cried the Viscount, gazing at his companion with the curiosity naturally aroused by that name, renowned in the love intrigues of the time. You know me, said Canoles. By reputation only, the Viscount replied, and by bad reputation. What would you have? Everyone follows his natural inclinations, and I love a life of excitement. You are perfectly free, monsieur, to live as you choose, rejoined the Viscount. Permit me, however, to express one thought that comes to my mind. What is it? That there's a woman yonder, deeply compromised for your sake, upon whom the Duke will wreak vengeance for his disappointment in your regard. The devil! Do you think it? Of course. Although she is a somewhat frail person, Mademoiselle de Lartigues is a woman nonetheless, and compromised by you. It is for you to look to her safety. Gad, you are right, my young Nestor, and in the pleasure of conversing with you, I was near forgetting my obligations as a gentleman. We have been betrayed, and in all probability, the Duke knows all. It is very true that Nanon is so clever that if she were warned in time, I would wager my life that she would make the Duke apologize. Now, let us see. Are you acquainted with the art of war, young man? Not yet, replied the Viscount with a laugh, but I fancy I am likely to learn it where I am going. Well, here's your first lesson. In war, you know, when force is out of question, we must resort to stratagem. Help me to carry out a stratagem. I ask nothing better. But in what way? Tell me. The inn has 2 doors. I know nothing about that. I know it. One that opens on a high road, and another that opens into the fields. I propose to go out by the one that leads into the fields, describe a semicircle, and knock at the back door of Nanon's house. Yes, so that you may be caught in the house, cried the Viscount. You would make a fine tactician, upon my word. Caught in the house? Repeated Canoles. Why, to be sure, the Duke, tired of waiting, and failing to see you leave the inn, will go to the house himself. Yes, but I will simply go in and out again. Once inside, you won't come out. There's no doubt about it, young man, said Canoles. You are a magician. You will be surprised, perhaps killed before our eyes. That's all there's about it. Pshaw, said Canoles. There are closets there. Oh, exclaimed the Viscount. This was uttered with such an eloquent intonation. It contained such a world of veiled reproach, of offended modesty, of charming delicacy, that Canoles stopped short and darted a piercing glance at the young man, who was leaning on the window-sill. Despite the darkness, he felt the full force of the glance, and continued in a playful tone, Of course, you're quite right, Baron. Go by all means, but conceal yourself carefully, so that you may not be surprised. No, I was wrong, said Canolles, and you are right. But how can I warn her? It seems to me that a letter. Who will carry it? I thought that I saw a servant following you. A servant, under such circumstances, runs the risk of nothing worse than a few blows, while a gentleman risks his life. Verily, I am losing my wits, said Canolles. Castorn will do the errand to perfection, especially as I suspect that the rascal is allies in the house. You see that the matter can all be arranged here, said the Viscount. Yes. Have you writing materials? No, but they have them downstairs. Pardon me, I beg you, said Canolles. Upon my word, I can't imagine what has happened to me this evening, for I say one idiotic thing after another. No matter. Thanks for your good advice, Viscount, and I shall act upon it immediately. Without taking his eyes from a young man, whom he had been examining for some moments with strange persistency, Canolles backed to the door and descended the stairs, while the Viscount muttered anxiously, "How he stares at me! Can he have recognized me?" Canolles, meanwhile, had gone down to the ground floor, and having gazed for a moment with profound sorrow at the quail, partridge, and sweetmeats, which Master Biscaros was himself packing in a hamper upon the head of his assistant cook, and which another than he was to eat perhaps, although they were certainly intended for him, he asked to be shown to his room, called for writing materials, and wrote to Nanon the following letter. Dear Madam, about 100 yards from your door, if nature had endowed your lovely eyes with the power to see in the dark, you could descry in a clump of trees Monsieur le Duc d'Epernon, who is awaiting my coming to have me shot, and compromise you woefully as a consequence. But I am by no means anxious to lose my life, or to cause you to lose your peace of mind. Have no fear, therefore, in that direction. For my own part, one proposed to make use of the leave of absence which you procured for me the other day, that I might take advantage of my freedom to come and see you. Where I am going, I have no idea. Indeed, I am not sure that I shall go anywhere. However that may be, recall your fugitive adorer when the storm has passed. They will tell you at the Golden Calf in which direction I have gone. You will give me due credit, I trust, for my self-sacrifice, but your interests are dearer to me than my own enjoyment. I say my own enjoyment because I should have enjoyed pommeling Monsieur d'Epernon and his minions under their disguise. Believe me, dear lady, your most devoted and most faithful servant. Canolles signed this effusion, overflowing with Gascon magniloquence, knowing the effect it would have upon the Gascon Nanon. Then he summoned his servant. Come hither, Master Castorn, said he, and tell me frankly on what terms you are with Mademoiselle Francinet. But, monsieur, replied Castorn, wondering much at the question, I don't know if I ought. Have no fear, Master Idiot. I have no designs upon her, and you haven't the honor of being my rival. I asked the question simply for information. Ah, that's a different matter, monsieur, and I may say that Mademoiselle Francinet has deigned to appreciate my good qualities. Then you are on the best of terms with her, aren't you, Monsieur Puppy? Very good. Take this letter and go around by the fields. I know the road, monsieur, said Castorn with a self-satisfied expression. Tea as well. Knock at the back door. No doubt you know that door, too? Perfectly well. Better and better. Take that road. Knock at that door, and hand this letter to Mademoiselle Francinet. Then, monsieur, said Castorn joyfully, you may start instantly. You have 10 minutes to go and come. This letter must be delivered to Mademoiselle Nanon de Lartigues at the earliest possible moment. But suppose they don't open the door, monsieur, queried Castorn, suspecting that something had gone wrong. Why, you must be a fool in that case, for you should have some particular way of knocking, which makes it certain that a brave fellow like you won't be left outside. If that's not the case, I am much to be pitied for having such a dolt in my service. I have a private knock, monsieur, said Castorn, with his most conquering air. First I knock twice softly, then a third. I don't ask you how you knock, nor do I care. If the door is opened, begone, and if you are taken by surprise, eat the paper, or I'll cut off your ears when you return, if it's not already done. Castorn was off like a flash, but when he reached the foot of the staircase, he stopped, and, in defiance of all rules, thrust the letter into the top of his boot. Then he left the inn by the barnyard door and made a long circuit, sneaking to the bushes like a fox, jumping ditches like a greyhound, until at last he reached the rear door of the little house, and knocked in peculiar fashion he had tried to explain to his master. It proved to be so effective that the door opened instantly. 10 minutes later, Castoren returned to the inn without accident, and informed his master that the letter was in the fair hands of Mademoiselle Nanon. Knowles had employed these 10 minutes in opening his portmanteau, laying out his robe de chamber, and ordering his supper to be served. He listened with visible satisfaction to Monsieur Castoren's report, and made a trip to the kitchen, giving his orders of night in a loud tone, and yawning immoderately, like a man who is impatient for bedtime to arrive. These maneuvers were intended to convince the Duc d'Epernon, if he had put spies upon him, that the Baron had never intended to go farther than the inn, where he had stopped for supper and lodging, like the unpretentious, inoffensive traveler he was. And the scheme really produced the result that the Baron hoped. A man in the guise of a peasant, who was drinking in the darkest corner of the public room, called the waiter, paid his reckoning, rose, and went out unconcernedly, humming a tune. Knowles followed him to the door, and saw that he went toward the clump of trees. In a few moments he heard the receding steps of several horses. The ambuscade was raised. Thereupon the Baron, with his mind at rest concerning Nanon, thought only of passing the evening as agreeably as possible. He therefore bade Castoren bring cards and dice, and, having done so, to go and ask the Vicomte de Cams if he would do him the honor to receive him. Castoren obeyed, and found at the Vicomte's door an old, white-haired squire, who held the door half open, and replied surlily to his complimentary message. "Impossible at present. Monsieur le Vicomte is very much engaged." "Very well," said Knowles, when the answer was reported to him. "I will wait," as he heard considerable noise in the direction of the kitchen. To pass the time away, he went to see what was going on in that important part of the establishment. The uproar was caused by the return of the poor scullion, more dead than alive. At the bend in the road, he was stopped by 4 men, who questioned him as to the objective point of his nocturnal expedition, and upon learning that he was carrying supper to the lady at the little house among the trees, stripped him of his cap, his white waistcoat, and his apron. The youngest of the 4 then donned the distinctive garb of the victim's profession, balanced the hamper on his head, and kept on toward the little house in the place instead of the scullion. Not long after, he returned and talked in a low tone with the man who seemed the leader of the party. Then they restored his vest and cap and apron, replaced the hamper on his head, and gave him a kick in the stern to start him in the direction he was to follow. The poor devil asked for no more definite instructions. He started off at full speed and fell half dead with terror at the door of the inn, where he had just been picked up. This episode was quite unintelligible to everybody except Knowles, and as he had no motive for explaining it, he left host, waiters, chambermaids, cook, and scullion to cudgel their brains over it. While they were outdoing one another in wild conjectures, he went up to the Vicomte's door, and, assuming that the first message he had sent him by the mouth of Monsieur Castoren permitted him to dispense with a second formality of the same nature, he opened the door unceremoniously and went in. A table, lighted and set with 2 covers, stood in the middle of the room, awaiting, to be complete, only the dishes with which it was to be embellished. Knowles noticed the 2 covers, and drew a joyful inference therefrom. However, the Viscount, when he saw him standing in the doorway, jumped to his feet so suddenly that it was easy to see that he was greatly surprised by the visit, and that the second cover was not intended for Baron, as he flattered himself for an instant that it was. His doubts were set at rest by the first words the Viscount uttered. "May I be permitted to know, Monsieur le Baron," he asked, walking to meet him ceremoniously, "to what new circumstance I am indebted for the honor of this visit?" "Why," rejoined Knowles, somewhat taken aback by this ungracious reception, "to a very natural circumstance. I am hungry. I thought that you must be in the same plight. You are alone, I'm alone, and I wish to have the honor of suggesting to you that we sup together." The Viscount looked at Knowles with evident distrust, and seemed to feel some embarrassment in answering him. "Upon my honor," said Knowles, laughing, "one would say that I frighten you. Are you a knight of Malta, pray? Are you destined for the church? Or has your respectable family brought you up in holy horror of the Knowles? Pardon you, I shall not ruin you if we pass an hour together on opposite sides of the table. Impossible for me to go to your room, Baron. Very well, don't do it, but as I am already here. Even more impossible, monsieur. I am expecting someone. This time Knowles was disarmed. You are expecting someone, he said. Yes. Faith, said Knowles, after a moment of silence. I should almost prefer that you let me go on at any risk, rather than spoil, by your manifest repugnance for my society, the service you rendered me, for which I fear that I have not as yet thanked you sufficiently. The young man blushed and walked to Knowles' side. Forgive me, monsieur, he said in a trembling voice. I realize how rude I am, and if it were not serious business, family matters which I have to discuss with the person I expect, it would be both an honor and a pleasure to admit you as a third, although— Oh, finish, said Knowles. Whatever you say, I am determined not to be angry with you. Although, continued the Viscount, our acquaintance is one of the unforeseen results of mere chance, one of those fortuitous meetings, one of those momentary relations. Why so? Queried Knowles. On the contrary, the most sincere and enduring friendships are formed in this way. We simply have to give credit to Providence for what you attribute to chance. Providence, monsieur, the Viscount rejoined with a laugh, decrees that I depart 2 hours hence, and that, in all probability, I take the opposite direction to that you will take. Receive, therefore, my sincere regrets of my inability to accept, gladly as I would do so if I could, the friendship you offer me so cordially, and of which I fully appreciate the worth. You are a strange fellow, upon my word, said Knowles, and the generous impulse upon which you act in the first place gave me quite a different idea of your character. But of course it shall be as you desire. I certainly have no right to persist, for I am your debtor, and you have done much more for me than I had any right to expect from a stranger. I will return, therefore, to my own room and sup alone, but I assure you, Viscount, it goes against my grain. I am not addicted to monologue. Indeed, notwithstanding what he said, and his declared purpose to withdraw, Knowles did not withdraw. Some power that he could not understand seemed to nail him to his place. He felt irresistibly drawn to the Viscount, who, however, took up a candle and approached him with a charming smile. Monsieur, said he, extending his hand, however that may be, and short as our acquaintance has been, I beg you to believe that I am overjoyed to have been of service to you. Knowles heard nothing but a compliment. He seized the hand the Viscount offered him, which was warm and soft, and, instead of answering his friendly, masculine pressure, was withdrawn at once, realizing that his dismissal was none the less a dismissal. Although couched in courteous phrase, he left the room disappointed and thoughtful. At the door he encountered the toothless smile of the old valet, who took the candle from the Viscount's hands, ceremoniously escorted Knowles to his door, and hastened back to his master, who was waiting at the top of the stairs. What is he doing? The Viscount asked in an undertone. I think he has made up his mind to take supper alone, replied Pompey. Then he won't come up again? I hope not, at least. Order the horses, Pompey. It will be so much time gained. But what is that noise? I should say it was Monsieur Ricken's voice. And Monsieur de Knowles? They seem to be quarreling. On the contrary, they are greeting each other. Listen, if only Rickon doesn't say anything. Oh, there's no fear of that. He's very circumspect. Hush! As they ceased to speak, they heard Knowles' voice. 2 covers, Master Biscaros, he cried. 2 covers. Monsieur Rickon sups with me. By your leave, no, replied Rickon. It's impossible. The deuce! So you 2 propose to sup alone like the young gentleman upstairs. What gentleman? The one upstairs, I say. What's his name? Vicomte de Cams. Oh, you know the Viscount, do you? Pardieu, he saved my life. He? Yes, he. How was that? Sup with me, and I'll tell you the whole story during supper. I cannot. I am to sup with him. Yes, he is awaiting someone. Myself. And as I am late, you will allow me to leave you, will you not, Baron? Sacre bleu. No, I will not allow it, cried Knowles. I have taken it into my head that I will sup in company, and you will sup with me, or I with you. Master Biscaros, 2 covers. But while Knowles turned his back to see if the order was executed, Rickon darted rapidly up the staircase. When he reached the top stair, a little hand met his and drew him into the Viscount's room, the door which immediately closed behind him, and was locked and bolted for greater security. "In very truth," muttered Knowles, looking about in vain for Rickon, and seating himself at a solitary table. "In very truth, I don't know what the people of this cursed country have against me. Some of them run after me to kill me, and others avoid me as if I had the plague. Corbleu, my appetite is vanishing. I feel that I am growing melancholy, and I am capable of getting as drunk as a lansquenet tonight. Ho, Castorin, come here and be thrashed. Why? They're locking themselves in up there as if they were conspiring. Double calf that I am. Of course they're conspiring. That's just it, and it explains everything. The next question is, in whose interest are they conspiring? The coadjutors? The princes? The parliaments? The kings? The queens? Monsieur de Mazarines? Faith! They may conspire against anyone they choose. It's all the same to me, and my appetite is returned. Castorin, order up my supper and give me some wine. I forgive you." Thereupon Knowles philosophically attacked the first supper that was prepared for Vicomte de Cams, which Master Biscaros was compelled to serve up to him, warmed over for lack of supplies. Chapter 4. Let us now see what was taking place under Nanon's roof, while Baron de Knowles was vainly seeking someone to sup with him, until, growing weary of the profitless quest, he decided at last to sup by himself. Nanon, whatever her enemies may have said or written, and among her enemies must be accounted the great majority of the historians who devoted any space to her, was, at this period, a charming creature of some 25 or 26 years, small of stature, dark-skinned, but with a supple, graceful figure, bright, fresh coloring, eyes of deepest black, in whose limpid depths all the passions and emotions found expression, gay on the surface, in appearance a laughing siren. But Nanon was very far from giving her mind to the whims and follies, which embroider with fantastic designs the silky and golden woof of which the life of a petite maitresse ordinarily consists. On the contrary, the most weighty conclusions, long and laboriously reasoned out in her shapely head, assumed an aspect no less seductive than clear when announced by her vibrating voice, in which the Gascon accent was very marked. No one would divine the untiring perseverance, the invincible tenacity, and the statesmanlike depth of insight which lay beneath that rosy, smiling mask, behind that look overflowing with voluptuous promise and glowing with passion. And yet, such were Nanon's qualities, good or bad according as we look at the face or the reverse of the medal. Such was the scheming mind, such the ambitious heart, to which her seductive body served as envelope. Nanon was of Agen, Monsieur le Duc d'Epernon, son of that inseparable friend of Henri IV, who was in his carriage when Ravelac's knife struck him, and was the object of suspicions which did not stop short of Marie de Medicis. Monsieur le Duc d'Epernon, appointed Governor Guyenne, where his arrogance, his insolence, and his exactions caused him to be generally execrated, was captivated by the little creature, who was the daughter of a simple attorney. He paid court to her, and conquered her scruples with great difficulty, and after long defense maintained with the skill of a consummate tactician, determined that the victor shall pay the full price of his victory. But, as a ransom of her thenceforth ruined reputation, Nanon had despoiled the Duke of his power and his freedom. At the end of the first 6 months of her liaison with the governor of Guyenne, she was a de facto ruler of that fair province, returning with interest the injuries and insults she had received from all those who had slighted or humiliated her. A queen by chance, she became a tyrant by design, shrewdly realizing the advisability of supplementing the probable brevity of her reign by abusing her power. As a consequence, she seized upon everything she could reach, treasure, influence, honors. She was enormously wealthy, distributed appointments, received visits from Mazarin and the leading noblemen at court. With admirable skill, she made of the various elements that she had at her disposal a combination useful to her credit and profitable to her fortune. Every service that Nanon rendered had its stated price. There was a regularly established tariff for appointments in the army and in the magistracy. Nanon would procure this position or that for some fortunate individual, but it must be paid for in hard cash or by a royal gift, so that when she relaxed her hold upon a fragment of power for the benefit of one person or another, she recouped the fragment in another form, giving up the authority, but retaining the money, which is its active principle. This explains the duration of her reign. For men, in their hatred, hesitate to overthrow an enemy who will have any consolation remaining in his downfall. Vengeance thirsts for total ruin, for complete prostration. Nations are reluctant to expel a tyrant who would carry away their money and depart with smiling face. Nanon de Lartigues had 2 millions, and so she lived in a species of security over the volcano, which was unceasingly shaking everything about her to its foundations. She had felt the popular hatred rise like the tide, increase in force, and assail with its waves the power of Monsieur d'Epernon, who, when hunted from Bordeaux in a day of wrath, had carried Nanon in his wake, as a ship carries a skiff. Nanon bent before the storm, ready to stand erect again when it should have passed. She had taken Monsieur de Mazarin for her model, and an humble pupil, she practiced at a distance the political tactics of the clever and pliable Italian. The cardinal's notice was attracted by this woman, who waxed great and wealthy by the same method, which had made him a prime minister, possessed of 50 millions. He admired the little Gascon. He did more than that. He let her do as she chose. Perhaps we shall eventually know why. Notwithstanding all this, and although some who claimed to be better informed averred that she corresponded directly with Monsieur de Mazarin, but little was said of the fair Nanon's political intrigues. Canolles himself, who, however, being young and rich and handsome, could not understand the need of intriguing, did not know what to think upon that point. As to love affairs, whether it was that Nanon, in her preoccupation by more serious matters, had postponed them to a more convenient season, or that the gossip caused by Monsieur d'Epernon's passion drowned whatever noise any secondary amours might have made. Even her enemies were not lavish of scandalous reports in her regard, and Canolles was justified in believing, as a matter of personal and national self-esteem, that Nanon was invincible before his appearance upon the scene. It may be that Canolles was, in truth, the beneficiary of the first real passion of that heart, hitherto accessible to ambition only. It may be that prudence had enjoined upon his predecessors absolute silence. At all events, Nanon, as mistress, was a fascinating woman. Nanon, insulted, was like to be a redoubtable foe. The acquaintance between Nanon and Canolles had come about in the most natural way. Canolles, a lieutenant in the Nivelles regiment, aspired to the rank of captain. In order to obtain the promotion, he was obliged to write to Monsieur d'Epernon, Colonel General of Infantry. Nanon read the letter and replied in the ordinary way, making a business appointment with Canolles. He selected from among his family jewels a magnificent ring, worth some 500 pistoles. It was less expensive than to purchase a company, and betook himself to the place appointed for the meeting. But on this occasion Canolles, preceded by the renown of his previous triumphs, upset all Mademoiselle de Lartigues' calculations. It was the first time that he had seen Nanon. It was the first time that Nanon had seen him. They were both young, handsome, and clever. Their conversation consisted chiefly of reciprocal compliments. Not a word was said concerning the business which brought them together, and yet the business was done. The next day Canolles received his captain's commission, and when the ring passed from his finger to Nanon's, it was not as the price of gratified ambition, but as a pledge of mutual love. Chapter 5. A few words will suffice to explain Nanon's residence near the village of Madafou. As we have said, the Duc d'Epernon was intensely hated in Guyenne. Nanon, who had been honored by being transformed into his evil genius, was execrated. The popular outcry drove them from Bordeaux to Agen. But at Agen it began anew. One day the gilded carriage in which Nanon was driving to join the Duke was overturned upon a bridge. By some unexplained means, Nanon found herself in the river, and Canolles pulled her out. One night Nanon's residence in the city took fire, and Canolles it was who made his way to her bedroom and saved her from the flames. Nanon concluded that the Agenots might probably succeed at the third trial. Although Canolles left her side as little as possible, it would be a miracle if he should always happen to be on hand at a given point to rescue her. She availed herself of the Duke's absence on a tour through the province, and of an escort of 1,200 men, of whom the Nivelles regiment furnished its quota, to leave the city at the same time with Canolles, hurling defiance from her carriage windows at the populace, who would like nothing so much as to wreck the carriage, but dared not. Thereafter the Duke and Nanon selected, or rather Canolles had secretly selected for them, the little country house where it was decided that Nanon should remain while an establishment was being prepared for her at Libourne. Canolles procured a leave of absence, ostensibly in order to attend to some private business at his home, really so that he might be at liberty to leave his regiment, which had returned to Agen, and to remain within a reasonable distance of Matafu, where a protecting presence was more necessary than ever. In fact, events were becoming alarmingly serious. The princes of Condé, Conti, and Longueville, who had been arrested and imprisoned at Vincennes on the January 17th preceding, afforded an excellent pretext for civil war to the 4 or 5 factions which divided France at that epoch. The unpopularity of the Duc d'Epernon, who was known to be entirely devoted to the court, continued to increase, although it was reasonable to hope that it had reached its limit, a catastrophe earnestly desired by all the factions who, under the extraordinary conditions prevailing in France at the time, did not themselves know where they stood, was imminent. Nanon, like the birds which see the storm approaching, disappeared from the sky and betook herself to her leafy nest, there to await the result unknown and in obscurity. She gave herself out as a widow, desirous of living in seclusion. So Master Biscaros described her. The reader will remember. Monsieur d'Epernon paid her a visit, and announced his intention of being absent for a week. As soon as he took his leave of her, Nanon sent by the tax collector, her protégé, a little note to Quenouille, who was making use of his leave of absence to remain in the neighborhood. But, as we have seen, the original note had disappeared in the messenger's hands, and had become a copy under Carvagnac's pen. The reckless young nobleman was making all haste to obey the summons contained therein, when the Vicomte de Cam stopped him 400 yards from his destination. We know the rest. Nanon therefore was awaiting Quenouille, as a woman who loves is wont to await the loved one, consulted her watch 10 times a minute, walking to the window again and again, listening to every sound, gazing questioningly at the sun as it sank in ruddy splendor behind the mountain, to give place to the first shades of night. The first knocking was at the front door, and she dispatched Francinette thither, but it was only the pseudo-waiter from the inn, bringing the supper for which the guest was lacking. Nanon looked out into the hall and saw Master Biscaros' false servant, who, for his part, stole a glance into the bedroom, where a tiny table was set with 2 covers. Nanon bade Francinette keep the dishes hot, then sadly closed the door and returned to the window, which showed her the road still deserted as far as she could see it in the gathering darkness. A second knock, a peculiar knock, was heard, this time at the back door, and Nanon cried, "Here he is." But still she feared that it was not he, and stopped in the middle of the room. The next moment the door opened, and Mademoiselle Francinette appeared on the threshold in evident consternation, holding the letter in her hand. Nanon spied the paper, rushed up to her, tore from her hand, hastily opened it, and read it in an agony of fear. The perusal of the letter was like a thunderclap to Nanon. She dearly loved Quenouille, but with her, ambition was almost equal to love, and in losing the Duc d'Epernon, she would lose not only all her hopes of fortune to come, but perhaps her accumulated wealth as well. However, as she was a quick-witted siren, she began by putting out the candle, which would have caused her shadow to betray her movements, and ran to the window. It was time, for men were approaching the house, and were not more than 50 feet away. The man in the cloak walked first, and the man in the cloak Nanon recognized the Duke beyond a peradventure. At that moment Mademoiselle Francinette entered, candle in hand. Nanon glanced despairingly at the table and the 2 covers, at the 2 armchairs, at the 2 embroidered pillows, which displayed their insolent whiteness against a background of crimson damask bed curtains, and at her fascinating negligee, which harmonized so well with all the rest. "I am lost," she thought. But almost immediately her wits returned to her, and a smile stole over her face. Like a flash she seized a plain glass tumbler intended for Quenouille, and threw it out into the garden, took from its box a golden goblet adorned with the Duke's arms, and placed beside his plate his silver cover. Then, shivering with fear, but with a forced smile upon her face, she rushed down the stairs and reached the door just as a grave, solemn blow was struck upon it. Francinette was about to open the door, but Nanon caught her by the arm, thrust her aside, and said, with that swift glance which, with women taken by surprise, serves so well to complete their thought, "I am waiting for Monsieur le Duc, not for Monsieur de Quenouille. Serve the supper." With that she drew the bolts herself, and threw herself upon the neck of the man with the white plume, who was preparing to greet her with a most savage expression. "Ah!" she cried. "My dream did not play me false. Come, my dear Duke, everything is ready, and we will go to supper at once." De Pernon was dumbfounded. However, as a caress from a pretty woman is always acceptable, he allowed himself to be kissed. But the next moment, he remembered what overwhelming proof he possessed. "One moment, mademoiselle," he said. "Let's have an understanding, if you please." With a wave of his hand to his followers, who drew back respectfully but did not go away altogether, the Duke entered the house alone, with slow and measured step. "Pray, what's the matter, my dear Duke?" said Nanon, with such well-feigned gaiety that anyone might have thought it natural. "Did you forget something the last time you were here, that you look around so carefully on all sides?" "Yes," said the Duke. "I forgot to tell you that I am not a consummate ass, a gérant, such as Monsieur Cyrano de Bergerac introduces in his comedies, and having forgotten to tell it you, I have returned in person to prove it to you." "I do not understand you, Monseigneur," said Nanon, with the most tranquil and sincere expression imaginable. "Explain yourself, I beg." The Duke's eyes rested on the 2 armchairs, and passed thence to the 2 covers and the 2 pillows. There they paused for a longer time, while an angry flush overspread his face. Nanon had foreseen all this, and she awaited the result of his scrutiny with a smile which disclosed her pearly teeth. But the smile strongly resembled a contraction of the nerves, and her teeth with a chatter of anguish had not kept them pressed tightly together. The Duke at last fixed his wrathful gaze upon her. "I am still awaiting your lordship's pleasure," said Nanon, with a graceful courtesy. "My lordship's pleasure is that you explain this supper. I have already told you that I dreamed that you would return today, although you left me only yesterday. My dreams never fail to come true, so I ordered this supper purposely for you." The Duke made a grimace which he intended to pass off for an ironical smile. "And the 2 pillows," he said. "Pray, is it Monseigneur's intention to return to Libourne? In that case, my dream lied to me, for it told me that Monseigneur would remain." The Duke made a second grimace, even more significant than the first. "And this charming negligee, madam? And these exquisite perfumes?" "It is one of those I am accustomed to wear when I expect Monseigneur. The perfume comes from sachets of Peau d'Espagne, which I put in my wardrobes, and which Monseigneur has often told me prefer to all others, because it is the Queen's favorite perfume." "And so you were expecting me?" rejoined the Duke with a sneering laugh. "Good lack, Monseigneur," said Nanon, frowning. "I believe, God forgive me, that you would like to look in the closets. Are you jealous by any chance?" Nanon laughed aloud, whereat the Duke assumed his most majestic air. "I jealous? No, no. Thank God, I'm no such idiot as that. Being old and rich, I know naturally that I was made to be deceived, but I propose to prove to those who deceive me that I am not their dupe." "How will you prove it, pray?" "I am curious to know." "Oh, it will be an easy matter. I shall simply have to show them this paper." He took a letter from his pocket. "I don't dream myself," he said. "At my age, one doesn't dream, even when awake. But I receive letters. Read this one. It's very interesting." Nanon shuddered as she took the letter the Duke handed her, and started when she saw the writing. But the movement was imperceptible, and she read: "Monseigneur Duc d'Epernon is informed that a man who, for 6 months past, has been on familiar terms with Mademoiselle Nanon de Lartigues, will visit her this evening, and will remain to supper and to sleep. As I do not desire to leave Monseigneur Duc d'Epernon in uncertainty, he is informed that his fortunate rival is Monsieur le Baron de Canoles." Nanon turned pale. The blow struck home. "Ah, Roland, Roland," she murmured, "I believe myself to be well rid of you." "Am I well informed?" queried the Duke, triumphantly. "Not by any means," retorted Nanon. "And if your political police is no better organized than your amorous police, I pity you." "You pity me?" "Yes. For this Monsieur de Canoles, whom you gratuitously honor by believing him to be your rival, is not here, and you are at liberty to wait and see if he comes." "He has come." "He," cried Nanon. "That is not true." There was an unmistakable accent of truth in this exclamation of the accused. "I mean that he came within 400 yards and stopped at the Golden Calf, luckily for him." Nanon saw that the Duke was not nearly so well informed as she had supposed at first. She shrugged her shoulders as another idea, prompted doubtless by the letter, which she was folding and unfolding in her hands, began to take root in her mind. "Is it possible," said she, "that a man of intellect, one of the cleverest politicians in the kingdom, allows himself to be gulled by anonymous letters? That's all very well, but how do you explain this letter, anonymous or not?" "Why?" "The explanation's very simple. It's simply a continuation of the generous proceedings of our friends at Agen. Monsieur de Canolles applied to you for leave of absence on account of urgent private business, and you granted it. They found out that he had come in this direction, and this absurd accusation has no other foundation than his journey." Nanon noticed that the Duke's features did not relax, but that his scowl became more pronounced. "The explanation would answer if the letter you attribute to your friends had not a certain postscript, which, in your confusion, you omitted to read." The young woman shivered with terror. She realized that, if chance did not come to her assistance, she could not long continue the struggle. "A postscript?" she repeated. "Yes, read it," said the Duke. "You have the letter in your hands." Nanon tried to smile, but she felt that her distorted features would not lend her aid to any such demonstration. She contented herself, therefore, with reading aloud, in the firmest tone she could command. "I have in my possession, mademoiselle, the Lartigues letter to Monsieur de Canolles, making the appointment I mentioned for this evening. I will give up the letter in exchange for a paper signed in blank by Monsieur d'Epernon, to be handed to me by a man, alone in a boat on the Dordogne, opposite the village of Saint-Michel-Rivière, at 6 o'clock in the evening." "And you were so imprudent," continued Nanon. "Your handwriting is so precious to me, dear lady, that I thought I could not pay too high a price for a letter of yours. And you revealed such a secret to the possible indiscretion of one of your servants. Oh, Monsieur le Duc! Such confidences, madam, a man should receive in person, and I so received this one. I, myself, was waiting in the boat on the Dordogne. Then you have my letter? Here it is." Nanon made a superhuman effort to remember the exact contents of the letter, but it was impossible. Her brain was beginning to be confused. She had no alternative, therefore, but to take her own letter and read it. It contained barely 3 lines. Nanon ran her eye over them in eager haste and saw, with unspeakable delight, that the letter did not compromise her beyond all hope. "Read it aloud," said the Duke. "Like you, I have forgotten what the letter contains." Nanon found the smile she had sought in vain a few seconds before, and complied with the Duke's suggestion. "I shall take supper at 8 o'clock. Are you free?" "I am. If so, be punctual, my dear Canolles, and have no fear for our secret." "I should say that is explicit enough," cried the Duke, pale with rage. "That is my salvation," thought Nanon. "So you have a secret with Monsieur de Canolles, have you?" continued the Duke. Chapter 6. Nanon realized that to hesitate for a second would be her destruction. Moreover, she had had time enough to develop in her brain the scheme suggested by the anonymous letter. "Yes," said she, gazing fixedly at the Duke, "I have a secret with that gentleman." "You confess it?" cried Monsieur d'Epernon. "I must, for one can conceal nothing from you." "Oh!" shouted the Duke. "Yes, I was expecting Monsieur de Canolles," continued Nanon, calmly. "You were expecting him?" "I was expecting him." "You dare admit it?" "Freely. Tell me, now, do you know who Monsieur de Canolles is?" "He is a jackanapes, whom I will punish cruelly for his impudence." "He is a noble and gallant gentleman, to whom you will continue your benefactions." "Oh, I swear by the Almighty that I will not." "No oaths, Monsieur le Duc, at all events, not until I have said what I have to say," rejoined Nanon, smiling sweetly. "Say on, then, but waste no time." "Haven't you, who are so skillful in probing the human heart to its lowest depths," said Nanon, "haven't you remarked my partiality for Monsieur de Canolles, my repeated solicitations in his interest, the captain's commission I procured for him, the grant of money for a trip to Bretagne with Monsieur de Milleray, his recent leave of absence, in a word, my constant efforts to gratify him?" Madam," said the Duke, "you exceed all bounds. For God's sake, Monsieur le Duc, wait until you hear the end." "Why should I wait any longer? What more is there for you to tell me?" "That I have a most affectionate interest in Monsieur de Canolles." "Pardieu, I know it well, that I am devoted to him, body and soul. Madam, you abuse, that I will do my utmost to oblige him while I live, and all because he's your lover. That's not difficult to guess. Because, continued Nanon, seizing the wrathful Duke's arm with a dramatic gesture, because he is my brother. Monsieur d'Epernon's arm fell to his side. Your brother? He said. Nanon nodded affirmatively with a triumphant smile. This calls for an explanation, the Duke cried, after a moment's reflection. Which I will give you, said Nanon. When did my father die? Why, about 8 months since, replied the Duke, after a short mental calculation. When did you sign the captain's commission for Canolles? At about the same time. A fortnight later, said Nanon. A fortnight later. It's very possible. It is a sad thing for me to disclose another woman's shame, to divulge a secret which belongs to us alone. You understand. But your extraordinary jealousy drives me to it. Your cruelty leaves me no alternative. I am like you, Monsieur le Duc. I lack generosity. Go on, cried the Duke, beginning to yield to the fair Gascon's imaginative flights. Very good. My father was an attorney of some note. 28 years ago he was still young, and he was always fine-looking. Before his marriage, he was in love with Monsieur de Canolles' mother, whose hand was denied him because she was of noble blood, and he a plebeian. Love undertook the task of remedying the mistakes of nature, as it often does. And during Monsieur de Canolles, the elder's absence from home. Now do you understand? Yes. But how does it happen that this affection for Monsieur de Canolles took possession of you so recently? Because I never knew the bond between us until my father's death. Because the secret was made known to me in a letter handed me by the Baron himself, who then addressed me as his sister. Where is that letter? Queried the Duke. Have you forgotten the fire which consumed everything I owned, all my most valuable jewels and papers? True, said the Duke. 20 times I have been on the point of telling you the story, feeling sure that you would do everything for him whom I call my brother under my breath. But he has always prevented me, always begged me to spare his mother's reputation, for she is still living. I have respected his scruples because I appreciated them. Ah, indeed, said the Duke, almost melted. Poor Canolles. And yet, continued Nanon, when he refused to let me speak, he threw away his own fortune. He's a high-minded youth, said the Duke, and his scruples do him honor. I did more than respect his scruples. I swore that the mystery should never be revealed to anyone on earth, but your suspicions caused the cup to overflow. Woe is me, I have forgotten my oath. Woe is me, I have betrayed my brother's secret. And Nanon burst into tears. The Duke fell upon his knees and kissed her pretty hands, which hung dejectedly at her side, while her eyes were raised toward heaven, as if imploring God's forgiveness for her perjury. You say, woe is me, cried the Duke. Say rather, good luck for all. I propose that poor Canolles shall make up for lost time. I don't know him, but I desire to know him. You shall present him to me, and I will love him like a son. Say like a brother, rejoined Nanon with a smile. Villainous informers, she suddenly cried, passing to another train of thought, and crumpling the letter in her hand as if she proposed to throw in the fire, but carefully placing it in her pocket, with a view of confronting its author with it later. Now that I think of it, said the Duke, why shouldn't the rascal come here? Why should I wait any longer before seeing him? I'll send at once to the Golden Calf to bid him come. Oh, of course, said Nanon, so that he may know that I can conceal nothing from you, and that I've told you everything in utter disregard of my oath. I will be careful. Ah, Monsieur le Duc, do you wish me to quarrel with you? Retorted Nanon, with one of those smiles which demons borrow from angels. How so, my dear love? Because you used to be more anxious for a tete-a-tete than now. Let us sup together, and tomorrow it will be time enough to send for Canolles. Between now and tomorrow, said Nanon to herself, I shall have time to warn him. So be it, said the Duke. Let us sup. Haunted by a vestige of suspicion, he added, under his breath, between now and tomorrow I will not leave her side, and if she succeeds in inventing any method of warning him, she's a sorceress. And so, said Nanon, laying her hand upon the Duke's shoulder, I may venture to solicit my friend and my brother's interest?" "Most assuredly," rejoined Epanon, "as much as you choose. Is it money?" "Money indeed," said Nanon. "He's in no need of money. Indeed, it was he who gave me the magnificent ring you have noticed, which was his mother's." "Promotion, then," said the Duke. "Ah, yes, promotion. We'll make him a colonel, won't we?" "Pest! How fast you go, my love. Colonel, to obtain that rank, he must have rendered His Majesty's cause some service." "Indeed," said the Duke, looking at Nanon out of the corner of his eye. "I shall have occasion to send someone on a confidential mission to the court." "To the court!" exclaimed Nanon. "Yes," replied the old courtier, "but that would separate you." Nanon saw that she must take some means to destroy this remnant of suspicion. "Oh, don't be alarmed about that. My dear Duke, what matters the separation, so long as there is profit in it? If he's near at hand, I can be of but little use to him. You are jealous, but at a distance you'll extend your powerful patronage to him. Exile him, expatriate him if it's for his good, and don't be concerned about me, so long as I retain my dear Duke's affection. Have I not more than enough to make me happy?" "Very well, it's agreed," said the Duke. "Tomorrow morning I will send for him and give him his instructions. And now, as you suggest," he continued, casting a much more amiable glance upon the 2 chairs, the 2 covers, and the 2 pillows, "and now, my love, let us up." They took their places at the table, smiling amicably at each other, so that Francinette herself, although in her capacity of confidential maid, she was well used to the Duke's peculiarities and her mistress's character, believed that her mistress was perfectly tranquil in her mind, and the Duke completely reassured. Chapter 7. The gentleman whom Knowles greeted by the name of Rickon went up to the first floor of the Golden Calf, and was taking supper there with the Viscount. He was the person whose coming the Viscount was impatiently awaiting when chance made him a witness of Monsieur d'Epernon's hostile preparations, and made it possible for him to render Baron de Knowles the important service we had described. He had left Paris a week before, and Bordeaux the same day, and was therefore the bearer of recent news concerning the somewhat disturbed state of affairs, and the disquieting plots which were brewing all the way from Paris to Bordeaux. As he spoke, now of the imprisonment of the princes, which was a sensation of the day, again of the Parliament of Bordeaux, which was a ruling power of the neighborhood, and still again of Monsieur de Mazarin, who was the king of the moment, the young man silently watched his strong, bronze face, his piercing, confident eye, his sharp, white teeth, which showed beneath his long, black mustache. Details which made Rickon the perfect type of the true soldier of fortune. "And so," said the Viscount, after his companion had told what he had to tell, "Madame la Princesse is now Chantilly? As is well known, both Duchesses de Condé were so called, but the additional title of Dowager was bestowed upon the elder of the 2. "Yes, and they look for you there at the earliest possible moment," said Rickon. "What is her situation?" "She is practically in exile. Her movements, as well as her mother-in-law's, are watched with the utmost care, for there is a shrewd suspicion at court that they do not mean to confine themselves to petitions to Parliament, and that they are concocting something for the benefit of the princes more likely to prove efficacious. Unfortunately, as always, money. Speaking of money, have you received what was due you? That is a question I was strongly urged to ask you. I have succeeded with great difficulty in collecting about 20,000 livres, and I have it with me in gold. That's all." "Oh, peste! Viscount, it's easy to see that you are a millionaire. To talk so contemptuously of such a sum at such a time. 20,000 francs. We shall be poorer than Monsieur de Mazarin, but richer than the king. Then you think that Madame la Princesse will accept my humble offering, Rickon? Most gratefully. It is enough to pay an army. Do you think that we shall need it?" "Need what? An army?" "Most assuredly, and we are busily at work levying one. Monsieur La Rochefoucauld has enlisted 400 gentlemen on the pretext that he wishes them to be present at the obsequies of his father. Monsieur le Duc de Bouillon is about starting for Guyenne with an equal number. Monsieur de Turin promises to make a descent upon Paris in the hope of surprising Vincennes and carrying off the princes by a coup de main. He will have 30,000 men, his whole army of the north, whom he has seduced from the king's service." "Oh, everything is going along well," Rickon continued. Never fear. I don't know if we shall perform any great deeds, but at all events we shall make a great noise. Did you not fall in with the Duc d'Epernon? Interposed a young man, whose eyes sparkled with joy at this enumeration of forces, which augured well for the triumph of the party to which he was attached. The Duc d'Epernon? Repeated Rickon, opening his eyes. Where do you suppose I fell in with him? I pray to know. I come from Agen, not from Bordeaux. You might have fallen in with him within a few steps of this place, replied the Viscount, smiling. Ah, yes, of course. The lovely Nanon de Lartigues lives in the neighborhood, does she not? Within 2 musket shots of the inn. The deuce! That explains the Baron de Canol's presence at the Golden Calf. Do you know him? Whom? The Baron? Yes. I might almost say that I am his friend, if Monsieur de Canol's were not of the oldest nobility, while I am only a poor roturier. Roturiers like yourself, Rickon, are quite as valuable as princes in our present plight. Do you know, by the way, that I saved your friend Baron de Canol's from a thrashing, if not from something much worse? Yes, he said something of that to me, but I hardly listened to him. I was in such haste to join you. Are you sure that he didn't recognize you? He could hardly recognize a person he had never seen. I should have asked if he did not guess who you are. Indeed, replied the Viscount. He looked at me very hard. Rickon smiled. I can well believe it, he said. One doesn't meet young gentlemen of your type every day. He seemed to me a jovial sort of fellow, said the Viscount, after a brief pause. A jovial fellow and a good fellow, too. He has a charming wit and a great heart. The Gascon, you know, is never mediocre in anything. He is in the front rank or is good for nothing. This one is made of good stuff. In love, as in war, he is at once a dandy and a gallant officer. I am sorry that he is against us. Indeed, as chance brought you in contact with him, you should have seized the opportunity to win him over to our side. A fugitive blush passed like a flash over the Viscount's pale cheeks. Mon Dieu, continued Rickon, with that melancholy philosophy which is sometimes found in men of the most vigorous temper, are we so sober-minded and reasonable, pray, that we manage to torch a civil war in our adventurous hands as if it were an altar light? Is Monsieur le Coadjuteur, who, with a word, tranquilizes or arouses Paris, a very serious-minded man? Is Monsieur de Beaufort, whose influence in the capital is so great that he is called Le Roi de Halles, King of the Markets, a very serious-minded man? Is Madame de Chevreuse, who makes and unmakes ministers at pleasure, a very serious-minded woman? Or Madame de Longueville, who nevertheless sat on the throne at the Hôtel de Ville for 3 months? Or Madame la Princesse de Condé, who, no longer ago than yesterday, was engrossed with dresses and jewels and diamonds? Lastly, is Monsieur le Duc d'Enghien, who is still playing with his jumping jacks, in charge of women, and who will don his first breeches, perhaps, to turn all France topsy-turvy. Is he a very serious-minded leader of a party? And myself, if you will allow me to mention my own name after so many illustrious ones, am I a very serious personage? I, the son of Miller of Angoulême, and one to retainer of Monsieur de La Rochefoucauld. I, to whom my master one day, instead of cloak to brush, gave a sword, which I gallantly buckled on at my side, an embryo warrior? And yet the son of the Miller of Angoulême, Monsieur de La Rochefoucauld's former valet de chamber, has risen to be a captain. He is levying a company, bringing together 400 or 500 men, with whose lives he is about to play, as if God himself had given him right. He is marching along on the road to greatness, some day to be colonel or governor of a fortress. Who knows? It may perhaps be his lot to hold for 10 minutes, an hour, or a day, the destiny of a kingdom in his hands. This much resembles a dream, as you see, and yet I shall consider a reality until the day when some great disaster awakens me. And on that day, the Viscount broke in, Woe to those who awaken you, Rickon, for you will be a hero. A hero or a traitor, according as we are the strongest or the weakest. Under the other cardinal, I should have looked twice, for I should have risked my head. Go to Rickon. Do not try to make me believe that such considerations can influence a man like you, who are pointed to as one of the bravest soldiers in the whole army. Oh, of course, said Rickon, with an indescribable motion of his shoulders. "I was brave when King Louis XIII, with his pale face, his blue ribbon, and his eye gleaming like a carbuncle, cried in his strident voice, biting the ends of his mustache, 'The king is looking at you. Forward, messers!' But when I am obliged to look at the same blue ribbon on the son's breast, which I can still see on the father's, and no longer behind me, but before my face, when I am obliged to shout to my soldiers, 'Fire on the King of France!' On that day," continued Rickon, shaking his head, "on that day, Viscount, I fear that I shall be afraid and aim badly. What snake have you trodden on today, that you persist in putting things in the worst light?" "My dear Rickon," the young man asked, "civil war is a deplorable thing, I know, but sometimes necessary. Yes, like the plague, the yellow fever, the black fever, fever of all colors. Do you think, for instance, Monsieur le Vicomte, that it is absolutely necessary that I, who have been so glad to grasp my good friend Canol's hand this evening, should run my sword through his body tomorrow, because I serve Madame la Princesse de Condé, who laughs at me, and he Monsieur de Mazarin at whom he laughs? It may fall out so." The Viscount made a horrified gesture. "Unless," pursued Rickon, "I am out in my reckoning, and he makes a hole in me in one way or another. Ah, you people have no appreciation of what war is. You see nothing but a sea of intrigue and plunge into it as if it were your natural element. As I said the other day to Her Highness, and she agreed with me, you live in a sphere wherein the artillery fire which mows you down seems to you simple fireworks." "In sooth, Rickon, you frighten me," said the Viscount, "and if I were not sure of having you at hand to protect me, I should not dare to start. But under your escort," he continued, holding out his little hand to the partisan, "I have no fear." "My escort?" said Rickon. "Oh, yes. You remind me of something I have forgotten. You will have to do without my escort, Monsieur le Vicomte. That arrangement has fallen through." "Why, are you not to return to Chantilly with me?" "I was to do so, in the event that my presence was not necessary here. But, as I was saying, my importance has increased to such a point that I received a positive command from Madame la Princesse not to leave the vicinity of the fort, upon which their designs, it seems." The Viscount uttered an exclamation of dismay. "What? I am to go without you," he cried. "To go with no one but honest Pompey, who is 100 times more a coward than I am myself. To travel halfway across France alone, or nearly so. Oh, no, I will not go, I swear it. I should die of fear before I arrived." "Oh, Monsieur le Vicomte," rejoined Rickon, laughing aloud, "do you forget the sword hanging by your side, pray? Laugh if you please, but I will not budge. Madame la Princesse promised me that you should go with me, and I agreed to make the journey only on that condition." "That's as you please, Viscount," said Rickon with assumed gravity. "However, they count upon you at Chantilly, and have a care, for princes soon lose patience, especially when they expect money." "To cap the climax," said the Viscount, "I must start during the night." "So much the better," laughed Rickon. "No one will see that you are afraid, and you will encounter greater cowards than yourself, who will run away from you." "You think so?" said the Viscount, by no means at ease, despite this reassuring suggestion. "But there's another way of arranging the matter," said Rickon. "Your fear is for the money, is it not? Very well. Leave the money with me, and I will send it by 3 or 4 trustworthy men. But, believe me, the best way to make sure that it arrives safely is to carry it yourself. You are right, and I will go, Rickon. As my bravery must go all lengths, I will keep the money. I fancy that Her Highness, judging by what you tell me, is even more in need of the money than myself. So perhaps I should not be welcome if I arrived empty-handed. I told you when I first came that you have a very martial air. Moreover, the king's soldiers are everywhere, and there is no war as yet. However, don't trust them too much, but bid Pompey load his pistols." "Do you say that simply to encourage me?" "Of course. He who realizes his danger doesn't allow himself to be taken by surprise. You had best go now," continued Rickon, rising. "The night will be fine, and you can be at Montluc before morning. Will our friend, the Baron, play the spy when we go?" "Oh, at this moment he is doing what we have just done, eating his supper, that is to say, and although his supper may not have been as good as ours, he is too much of a bon vivant to leave the table without a weighty reason. But I will go down and keep his attention diverted. Apologize to him for me, for my rudeness. I don't choose that he shall pick a quarrel with me, if we meet some day when he is less generously disposed than today, for your baron must be a very punctilious sort of fellow. You have hit the right word. He will be just a man to follow you to the ends of the world simply to cross sword with you, but I will make your excuses, never fear. Do so by all means, but wait till I am gone. You may be very sure that I will. Have you no message for Her Highness? Indeed I have. You remind me of the most important thing of all. Have you written to her? No. There are but 2 words to say to her. What are they? Bordeaux, yes. She will know what they mean? Perfectly. And on the faith of those 2 words she may set out in full confidence. You may say to her that I will answer for everything. Come, Pompey, said the Viscount to the old squire, who just then partly opened the door and showed his head in the opening. Come, my friend, we must be off. Oh, exclaimed Pompey, can it be that Monsieur le Vicomte thinks of starting now? There's going to be a frightful storm. What's it you say, Pompey? Rejoined Riccon. There's not a cloud in the sky, but we may lose our way in the dark. That would be a difficult thing to do. You have simply followed the high road. Besides, it's a superb moonlight night. Moonlight, muttered Pompey. You understand, of course, that what I say is not on my own account, Monsieur Riccon. Of course not, said Riccon, an old soldier. When one has fought against the Spaniards and been wounded at the Battle of Corbie, pursued Pompey, swelling up, one doesn't know what fear is. Eh? Oh, well, that is most fortunate, for Monsieur le Vicomte is by no means at ease. I warn you. Oh, exclaimed Pompey, turning pale, are you afraid? Not with you, my good Pompey, said the Viscount. I know you, and I know that you would sacrifice your own life before anything should happen to me. To be sure, rejoined Pompey. But if you are too much afraid, we might wait until tomorrow. Impossible, my good Pompey. So take the gold and put it in your saddlebags. I will join you in a moment. It's a large sum to expose to the risks of a journey at night, said Pompey, lifting the bag. There's no risk. At all events, Riccon says so. Are the pistols in the holsters, the sword in the scabbard, and the musket slung on its hook? You forget, replied the old squire, drawing himself up, that when a man has been a soldier all his life, he doesn't allow himself to be caught napping. Yes, Monsieur le Vicomte, everything is in its place. The idea, observed Riccon, that anyone could be afraid with such a companion. A pleasant journey to you, Viscount. Thanks for the wish, but it's a long way, replied the Viscount, with a residuum of distress which Pompey's martial bearing could not dissipate. Nonsense, said Riccon. Every road has a beginning and an end. My respectful homage to Madame la Princesse. Tell her that I am at her service and Monsieur La Rochefoucauld's while I live, and do not forget the 2 words. Bordeaux, yes. I will go and join Monsieur de Canolles. Look you, Riccon, said the Viscount, laying his hand upon his companion's arm as he put his foot on the first stair. If this Canolles is such a gallant officer and honorable gentleman as you say, why should not you make some attempt to win him over to our side? He might overtake us at Chantilly or even on the way thither. As I have some slight acquaintance with him, I would present him. Riccon looked at the Viscount with such a strange smile that he, reading upon the partisan's face what was passing through his mind, made haste to add, Consider that I said nothing, Riccon, and act as you think you ought to act in the premises. Adieu. He gave him his hand and hastily returned to his room, whether in dread that Riccon would see the sudden blush that overspread his face, or that Canolles, whose noisy laughter they could plainly hear, would hear their voices. He therefore left the partisan to descend the stairs, followed by Pompey, who carried the valise with an air of studied indifference, so that no one might suspect the nature of its contents. Having waited a few moments, he cast his eye around the room to make sure that he had forgotten nothing, extinguished the candles, stole cautiously down to the ground floor, venturing a timid glance through the half-open door, a brilliantly lighted room on that floor, and, wrapping himself closely in a heavy cloak which Pompey handed him, placed his foot in the squire's hand. leaped lightly into the saddle, scolded the old soldier good-naturedly for his moderation, and disappeared in the darkness. As Rickon entered the room occupied by Knowles, whom he had undertaken to entertain while the little Viscount was making his preparations for departure, a joyful shout issuing from the Baron's mouth, as he sat uncertainly upon his chair, proved that he bore no ill will. Upon the table, between two transparent bodies which had once been full bottles, stood a thick-set wicker-covered vessel, proud of its rotundity, through the interstices of which the bright light of 4 candles caused a sparkling as of rubies and topazes. It was a flask of the old Collier vintage, whose honeyed flavor is so delicious to the overheated palate. Appetizing dried figs, biscuit, almonds, and high-flavored cheeses bore witness to the shrewdness of the innkeeper's reckoning, as the 2 empty bottles and a third, but half-filled, demonstrated its exactitude. Indeed, it was certain that whoever should partake of that tempting dessert would necessarily, however sober he might ordinarily be, consume a great quantity of liquid food. Now Knowles did not plume himself upon being an anchorite. Perhaps, indeed, being a Huguenot. Knowles was a Protestant family, and mildly professed the religion of his fathers. Perhaps, we say, being a Huguenot, Knowles did not believe in canonizing the pious hermits who won a dwelling in heaven by drinking water and eating dried roots. And so, melancholy as he was, or in love if you please, Knowles was never insensible to the fumes of a good dinner, or to the sight of those bottles of peculiar shape, with red, yellow, or green seals, which confine, with the assistance of trusty cork, the purest blood of Gascony, Champagne, or Burgundy. Under the present circumstances, therefore, Knowles had, as usual, yielded to the fascinations of that sight. From the sight he had passed to the smell, from the smell to the taste, and 3 out of the 5 senses with which our kindly common mother, whom we call Dame Nature, has endowed her children, being fully satisfied, the 2 others awaited their turn patiently and with beatific resignation. It was at this juncture that Rickon entered and found Knowles rocking on his chair. My dear Rickon, you come in good time," he cried. "I was in great need of somebody to whom to sing Master Biscaro's praises, and I was almost reduced to the point of doing it to this idiot of a Castoran, who only knows how to drink, and whom I have never been able to teach to eat. Just look at that sideboard, my friend, and cast your eye over this table, at which I invite you to take a seat. Is not mine host of the Golden Calf a veritable artist, a man whom I can safely recommend to my friend the Duc d'Epernon? Listen to the details of this menu, and judge for yourself, Rickon, for you know how to appreciate such things. Potage de bisques, hors d'oeuvre, pickled oysters, anchovies, small fowl, capon aux olives, with a bottle of Médoc, of which you see the corpse here, a partridge stuffed with truffles, peas au caramel, wild cherry ice, irrigated by a bottle of Chambertin, here lying dead. Furthermore, this dessert and this bottle of Collier, which is trying hard to defend itself, but will soon go to join the others, especially if we join forces against it. Sarpejit, I am in the best of humor, and Biscaro's is a past master. Sit you down, Rickon. You have supped, but what's the odds? I have supped too, but that makes no difference. We will begin again. Thanks, Baron, said Rickon with a laugh, but I am not hungry. I grant you that one may have ceased to be hungry and still be athirst. Taste this Collier. Rickon held out his glass. And so you have supped, continued Knowles. Supped with your little rascal of a Viscount? Oh, I beg your pardon, Rickon. I am wrong. A charming boy, to whom I owe my present pleasure of looking at life on its beautiful side, instead of giving up the ghost through 3 or 4 holes, which the gallant Duc d'Epernon had it in contemplation to make in my skin. I am very grateful, therefore, to the charming Viscount, the fascinating Ganymede. Ah, Rickon, you have every appearance of being just what you are said to be, a devoted servant of Monsieur de Condé. A truce to your pleasantry, Baron, cried Rickon, laughing uproariously. Don't say such things as that, or you will kill me with laughter. Kill you with laughter. Go to my dear fellow. Not you. Igni tantum perituri quia estis, landeriri. You know the lament, do you not? It's a Christmas carol, written by your patron upon the German river Rhenus, one morning when he was consoling one of his followers, who dreaded death by drowning. Oh, you devil of a Rickon. No matter. I am shocked at your little gentleman to take so deep an interest in the first well-favored cavalier who passes." As he finished, Knowles fairly rolled off his chair, shrieking with laughter and pulling at his mustache in a paroxysm of merriment in which Rick Hahn could not help joining. "Seriously, my dear Rick Hahn," Knowles resumed, "you are conspiring, aren't you?" Rick Hahn continued to laugh, but somewhat less frankly. "Do you know that I had a great mind to have you and your little gentleman arrested? Corbleu, that would have been amusing and very easy, too. I had the staff-bearers of my good gossip Diepenon at hand. Ah, Rick Hahn to the guardhouse, and the little gentleman, too. Landeriri." At that moment, they heard two horses galloping away from the inn. "Oh ho," said Knowles. "What might that be, Rick Hahn? Do you know? I have a shrewd suspicion." "Tell me, then." "It's the little gentleman going away." "Without bidding me adieu," cried Knowles. "He is a consummate bore." "Oh, no. My dear Baron, he's a man in a hurry. That's all." Knowles frowned. "What extraordinary manners," said he. "Where was the fellow brought up?" "Rick Hahn, my friend, I tell you frankly that he does you no credit. That's not the way gentlemen should treat one another. Corbleu, if I had him here, I believe I would box his ears. The devil fly away with his father, who, from stinginess, I doubt not, gave him no governor." "Don't lose your temper, Baron," said Rick Hahn with a laugh. "The Viscount isn't so ill-bred as you think. For, as he went away, he bade me express to you his deep regret and say 1,000 complimentary things to you." "Nonsense." "Nonsense," said Knowles. "Court holy water, which transforms a piece of arrant impudence into a trifling rudeness. That's all of that. Corbleu, I'm in a ferocious humor. Pick a quarrel with me. Rick Hahn, you refuse? Wait a moment. Sarpejou, Rick Hahn, my friend, I consider you an ill-favored villain." Rick Hahn began to laugh. "In this mood, Baron," said he, "you would be quite capable of winning 100 pistoles from me this evening, if we should play. Luck, you know, always favors the disappointed." Rick Hahn knew Knowles, and designedly opened this vent for his ill humor. "Ah, pardieu," he cried. "Let us play? You are right, my friend, and the suggestion reconciles me to your company. Rick Hahn, you are a very agreeable fellow. You are as handsome as Adonis, Rick Hahn, and I forgive Monsieur de Camst. Cards, Castorin." Castorin hurried in, accompanied by Biscaros. Together they prepared a table, and the two guests began to play. Castorin, who had been dreaming for 10 years of martingale at Tronarant, and Biscaros, whose eye gleamed covetously at the sight of money, stood on either side of the table looking on. In less than an hour, notwithstanding his prediction, Rick Hahn had won 40 pistoles from his opponent, whereupon Knowles, who had no more money about him, bade Castorin bring him a further supply from his valise. "It's not worthwhile," said Rick Hahn, who overheard the order. "I haven't time to give you your revenge." "What's that?" "You haven't time," exclaimed Knowles. "No, it is 11 o'clock," said Rick Hahn, "and at midnight I must be at my post." "Nonsense. You are joking," rejoined Knowles. "Monsieur le Baron," observed Rick Hahn gravely, "you are a soldier, and consequently you know the rigorous rules of service." "Then why didn't you go before you won my money?" retorted Knowles, half smiling, half angry. "Do you mean to reproach me for calling upon you? God forbid. But consider, I haven't the slightest inclination to sleep, and I shall be frightfully bored here. Suppose I should propose to bear you company, Rick Hahn? I should decline the honor, Baron. Affairs of the nature of that upon which I am engaged are transacted without witnesses." "Very good. You are going in what direction?" "I was about to beg you not to ask me that question. In what direction has the Viscount gone?" "I am obliged to tell you that I have no idea." Knowles looked at Rick Hahn to make sure that there was no raillery in his disobliging answers, but the kindly eye and frank smile of the governor of Vers disarmed his curiosity, if not his impatience. Well, you are a perfect treasure house of mysteries, my dear Rick Hahn, but no compulsion. I should have been disgusted enough if anyone had followed me 3 hours ago, although, after all, the man who followed me would have been as disappointed as I was myself. So one last glass of Calier, and good luck to you." With that, Knowles refilled the glasses, and Rickhan, having emptied his to the Baron's health, took his leave, nor did it once occur to the Baron to watch to see in which direction he went. Left to his own resources, amid the half-burned candles, empty bottles, and scattered cards, he fell a prey to one of those fits of depression which no one can understand without experiencing them. For his jovial humor throughout the evening had its origin in a disappointment which he had labored to forget, with but partial success. He dragged his feet along toward his bedroom, casting a sidelong glance, half regretful, half angry, through the window in the hall toward the isolated house, where a single window, through which a reddish light shone, intercepted from time to time by more than one shadow, proved with sufficient certainty that Mademoiselle de Lartigues was passing a less lonely evening than himself. On the first stair, the toe of Knowles' boot came in contact with some object. He stooped and picked up one of the Viscount's diminutive pearl-gray gloves, which he had dropped as haste to leave Master Biscaro's hostelry, and which he probably did not consider of sufficient value to waste his time in searching for it. Whatever may have been Knowles' reflections in a moment of misanthropy not to be wondered at in an offended lover, there was not at the isolated house a whit more real satisfaction than at the Golden Calf. Nanon was restless and anxious throughout the night, revolving in her mind 1,000 schemes to warn Knowles, and she resorted to every device that a well-developed female brain could suggest in the way of cunning and trickery to extricate herself from her precarious situation. Her only object was to steal 1 minute from the Duke to speak to Francinet, or 2 minutes to write a line to Knowles upon a scrap of paper. But you would have said that the Duke, suspecting all that was passing through her mind, and reading her anxiety through the mask of cheerfulness which her face wore, had sworn to himself that he would not vouchsafe to her one moment of that liberty which was so essential to her peace of mind. Nanon had a sick headache. Monsieur d'Epernon would not hear of her rising to get her bottle of salts, but went to look for it himself. Nanon pricked herself with a pin, and a ruby drop appeared at the end of her taper finger. She essayed to go to her toilet case for a piece of the famous rose taffeta, which was just coming into favor, but Monsieur d'Epernon, with indefatigable devotion to her comfort, rose, prepared the rose taffeta with disheartening dexterity, and locked the toilet case. Nanon thereupon pretended to be sleeping soundly. Almost immediately the Duke began to snore. At that, Nanon opened her eyes, and by the glimmer of the night-light in its alabaster vessel on a table by the bed, she tried to take the Duke's own tablets from his doublet, which was within her reach, but just as she had the pencil in her hand, and was about tearing off a leaf of paper, the Duke opened one eye. "What are you doing, my love?" he asked. "I was looking to see if there isn't a calendar in your tablets." "For what purpose?" "To see when your birthday comes." "My name is Louis, and my birthday falls on August 25th, as you know, so you have abundant time to prepare for it, dear heart." And he took the tablets from her hands and replaced them in his doublet. By this last maneuver, Nanon had at all events secured pencil and paper. She stowed them away under her bolster and very adroitly overturned the nightlight, hoping to be able to write in the dark. But the Duke immediately rang for Francinet and loudly demanded a light, declaring that he could not sleep unless he could see. Francinet came running in before Nanon had had time to write half of her sentence, and the Duke, to avoid another similar mishap, bade the maid place 2 candles on the chimney-piece. Thereupon Nanon declared that she could not sleep with so much light, and resolutely turned her face to the wall, awaiting the dawn in feverish impatience and anxiety easy to understand. The dreaded day broke at last, and bedimmed the light of the 2 candles. Monsieur le Duc d'Epernon, who prided himself upon his strict adherence to a military mode of life, rose as the first ray of dawn stole into the jalousies, dressed without assistance, in order not to leave his little Nanon for an instant, donned his robe to chamber, and rang to ask if there were any news. Francinet replied by handing him a bundle of dispatches which Cortavos, his favorite outrider, had brought during the night. The Duke began to unseal them and to read with one eye. The other eye, to which he sought to impart the most affectionate expression he could command, he did not once remove from Nanon. Nanon would have torn him in pieces, if she could. "Do you know what you ought to do, my dear?" said he, after he had read a portion of the dispatches. "No, monseigneur, but if you will give your orders, they shall be obeyed." "You should send for your brother," said the Duke. "I have here a letter from Bordeaux containing the information I desired, and he might start instantly, so that when he returned, I should have an excuse for giving him promotion you suggest." The Duke's face was a picture of open-hearted benevolence. "Courage," said Nanon to herself. "There's a possibility that Knowles will read in my eyes what I want to say, or will understand a hint. Send yourself, my dear Duke," she said aloud, for she suspected that if she undertook to do the errand herself, he would not allow her. De Pernon called Francinet, and dispatched her to the inn with no other instructions than these: "Say to Monsieur le Baron de Knowles that Mademoiselle de Lartigues expects him to breakfast." Nanon darted a meaning glance at Francinet, but, eloquent as it was, Francinet could not read in it. "Tell Monsieur le Baron de Knowles that I am his sister." Francinet departed on her errand, satisfied that there was a needle under the rock, and that the needle might prove to be a good, healthy serpent. Meanwhile, Nanon rose and took up a position behind the Duke, so that she might be able, at the first glance she exchanged with Knowles, to warn him to be on his guard, and she busied herself in constructing a sentence by means of which she might at the outset convey to the Baron all that he ought to know, in order that he might not sing false in the family trio about to be performed. "Ah!" exclaimed the Duke, "Francinet is returning," and he fixed his eyes upon Nanon's, who was compelled to look away from the road to meet his gaze. Nanon's heart was beating as if it would burst through her breast. She had seen no one but Francinet, and it was Knowles whom she hoped to see, and to read in his face some comforting assurance. Steps were heard upon the stairs. The Duke prepared a smile which was at once condescending and affable. Nanon forced back the flush which mounted to her cheeks, and summoned all her strength for the conflict. Francinet tapped gently at the door. "Come in," said the Duke. Nanon conned the famous sentence with which she proposed to greet Knowles. The door opened. Francinet was alone. Nanon gazed eagerly into the reception room. There was no one there. "Madam," said Francinet, with the imperturbable self-possession of a comedy soubrette, "Monsieur le Baron de Knowles has left the golden calf." The Duke stared, and his face grew dark. Nanon threw back her head and drew a long breath. "What?" exclaimed the Duke. "Monsieur de Knowles is not the golden calf." "You are surely mistaken," Francinet chimed in Nanon. "Madam," said Francinet, "I tell you what Monsieur Biscaros himself told me." "He must have guessed the whole truth," murmured Nanon. "Dear Knowles, as quick-witted and clever as he is gallant and handsome." "Go at once to Master Biscaros," said the Duke, with a face like a thundercloud, "and—" "Oh, I fancy," said Nanon hastily, "that he knew you were here and disliked to disturb you. Poor Knowles is so timid." "Timid!" echoed the Duke. "That isn't the reputation he bears, unless I am much mistaken." "No, madam," said Francinet. "Monsieur le Baron has really gone." "How does it happen, madam, I pray to know, that the Baron is afraid of me, when Francinet was instructed to invite him in your name? Did you tell him I was here, Francinet? Answer." "I could not tell him, Monsieur le Duc, as he was not there." Notwithstanding this rejoinder, which was uttered with an absence of hesitation that betokened sincerity, the Duke seemed to have become as suspicious as ever. Nanon, in her joy at the turn the affair had taken, could not find strength to say a word. "Must I return and summon Master Biscaros?" queried Francinet. "Most assuredly," said the Duke in his harshest voice. "But no, wait a moment. Remain here. Your mistress may need you, and I will send Cortavos." Francinet vanished. 5 minutes later, Cortavos knocked at the door. "Go and bid the landlord of the Golden Calf come hither, and bring with him a breakfast menu. Give him these 10 louis, so that the breakfast may be a good one," said the Duke. Cortavos received the money on the skirt of his coat, and took himself off at once to execute his master's orders. He was a servant of good family, and knowing enough of his trade to give lessons to all the Crispins and Mascarillos of the day. He found Biscaros, and said to him, "I have induced Monsieur to order a good breakfast, and he gave me 8 louis. I keep 2, of course, for my commission, and here are 6 for you. Come at once." Biscaros, tremulous with joy, tied a white apron around his loins, pocketed the 6 louis, and pressing Cortavos' hand, followed close upon his heels as he trotted away toward the little house. Chapter 8. This time Nanon was without apprehension. Francinet's intelligence had reassured her completely, and she was even very anxious to talk with Biscaros. He was ushered in, therefore, immediately upon his arrival. Biscaros entered the room with his apron politely tucked in his belt and cap in hand. "You had at your house yesterday a young gentleman, Monsieur le Baron de Canoles, did you not?" said Nanon. "What has become of him?" added the Duke. Biscaros, somewhat ill at ease, for the outrider and the 6 Louis made him more than suspect a great personage under the robe de chamber, replied evasively, "He has gone, monsieur." "Gone," said the Duke. "Really gone?" "Really. Where has he gone?" Nanon asked. "That I cannot tell you, for, in very truth, I do not know, madam." "You know at least in which direction he went." "He took the Paris road." "At what hour did he take that road?" asked the Duke. "About midnight." "And without saying anything?" queried Nanon, timidly. "Without saying anything. He simply left a letter and bade me hand it to Mademoiselle Franceinette." "Well, why haven't you handed it to her, knave?" said the Duke. "Is that all the respect you have for a nobleman's command?" "I did hand it to her, monsieur, I did indeed." "Franceinette!" roared the Duke. Franceinette, who was listening at the door, made but one bound from the reception room into the bedroom. "Why didn't you give your mistress the letter Monsieur de Canoles left for her?" "Why, monseigneur," murmured the maid, in deadly terror. "Monseigneur," thought the amazed Biscaros, shrinking into the most remote corner of the room. "Monseigneur, it must be some prince in disguise." "I had not asked her for it," Nanon, pale as a ghost, hastened to say. "Give it me," said the Duke, extending his hand. Poor Franceinette slowly held out the letter, turning to her mistress with a look which seemed to say, "You see that it's no fault of mine. That imbecile of Biscaros has ruined everything." 2 fierce gleams shot from Nanon's eyes and pierced Biscaros in his corner. The sweat stood in great drops on the poor wretch's brow, and he would have given the 6 Louis he had in his pocket to be standing in front of his oven with the handle of the saucepan in his hand. Meanwhile, the Duke had taken the letter and opened it, and was reading. As he read, Nanon stood beside him, paler and colder than a statue, feeling as if no part of her were alive save her heart. "What does all this mean?" queried the Duke. Nanon knew by that question that the letter did not compromise her. "Read it aloud, and I can explain perhaps," said she. "Dear Nanon," the Duke began. He turned to his companion, who became more composed with every second and bore his gaze with admirable self-possession. "Dear Nanon," the Duke resumed, "I am availing myself of the leave of absence I owe to your good offices, and to divert my mind, I am going for a short gallop on the Paris road. Au revoir. I commend my fortune to your attention." "Assier, why, this Canoles is mad." "Mad? Why so?" rejoined Nanon. "Does a sane man start off in this way at midnight, without a reason for so doing?" "I should say as much," said Nanon to herself. "Come, explain his departure to me." "Eh, mon Dieu, monseigneur," said Nanon with a charming smile. "Nothing could be easier than that." "She, too, calls him monseigneur," muttered Biscaros. "He is a prince, beyond question." "Well, tell me." "What? Can you not guess which way the wind blows?" "Not in the least." "Canoles is 27 years old. He is young, handsome, thoughtless. What particular form of madness do you suppose he prefers?" "Love. He must have seen some fair traveler pass Master Biscaro's door and have followed her." "He's in love, you think?" cried the Duke, smiling at the very natural reflection that, if Canoles was in love with any traveler whatsoever, he was not in love with Nanon. "Why, yes, of course he's in love." "Isn't that it, Master Biscaros?" said Nanon, enchanted to see that the Duke accepted her suggestion. "Come, answer freely. Have I not guessed aright?" Biscaros thought that the moment had come to reestablish himself in the young woman's good graces by assenting freely to whatever she might say, and with a smile about 4 inches wide blooming upon his lips, he said. Nanon stepped toward him, shuddering in spite of herself. "It is so, is it not?" she said. "I think so, madam," replied Biscaros, with a knowing air. "You think so?" "Yes, wait a moment. Indeed, you open my eyes." "Ah, Tell us about it, Master Biscaros, rejoined Nanon, beginning to feel the first pricks of jealousy. Come, tell us what fair travelers tarried at your hostelry last night. Yes, tell us, said Monsieur d'Epernon, stretching out his legs, and making himself comfortable in an easy chair. There were no lady travelers, said Biscaros. Nanon breathed again. But, continued the innkeeper, not suspecting that every word he uttered made Nanon's heart leap, there was a little fair-haired gentleman, very plump and dainty, who didn't eat or drink, and who was afraid to resume his journey after dark. A young gentleman who was afraid, repeated Biscaros, with an extremely cunning nod. You understand, do you not? Ha! 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 Laughed the Duke, condescendingly, biting freely at the hook. Nanon answered his laughter with something very like gnashing of the teeth. Go on, said she. It's a charming story. Of course the little gentleman was awaiting Monsieur de Canolles. No, no. He was waiting for a tall, mustachioed gentleman to sup with him, and was even somewhat uncivil to Monsieur de Canolles when he proposed that they should sup together. But that worthy gentleman was not discouraged by so small a matter. He's an enterprising young man, apparently, and faith, after the departure of the tall man, who turned to the right, he rode after the short one, who turned to the left. With this Rabelaisian conclusion, Biscaros, observing the Duke's expansive features, thought that he might indulge in an ascending scale of roars of laughter, of so stentorian quality that the windows rattled. The Duke, whose mind was entirely relieved from a great weight, would have embraced Biscaros if the least drop of noble blood had flowed in his veins. As for Nanon, with pallid cheeks and a convulsive smile frozen upon her lips, she listened to every word that fell from the innkeeper's lips, with that devouring faith which leads the jealous to drink freely to the dregs of poison which destroys their lives. What leads you to think, said she, that your little gentleman is a woman, and that Monsieur de Canolles is in love with her, rather than that he is riding about the country because he is bored or to gratify a whim? What makes me think so, replied Biscaros, determined to bring conviction home to the minds of his hearers. Wait, and I will tell you. Yes, tell us, my good friend, said the Duke. Egad, you are an amusing fellow. Monseigneur is too kind, said Biscaros. It was like this. The Duke became all ears, and Nanon listened with clenched fists. I suspected nothing, and had taken the little fair-haired cavalier for a man readily enough, when I met Monsieur de Canolles halfway upstairs, with a candle in his left hand, and in his right a small glove, which he was examining and passionately smelling. Ho! 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 Roared the Duke, whose spleen vanished with amazing rapidity, as soon as he ceased to have any apprehension on his own account. A glove! Exclaimed Nanon, trying to remember she had not left such a pledge in possession of her knight. A glove like this? As she spoke, she handed the innkeeper one of her own gloves. No, said Biscaros, a man's glove. A man's glove? Monsieur de Canolles staring at a man's glove and passionately smelling it? You are mad. No, for it belonged to the little gentleman, the pretty little blonde cavalier, who neither ate nor drank and was afraid of the dark, a tiny glove in which Madame could hardly put her hand, although Madame certainly has a pretty hand. Nanon gave a sharp little cry, as if she had been struck by an invisible arrow. I trust, said she, with a mighty effort, that you have all the information you desire, Monseigneur, that you know all you wish to know. With trembling lips, clenched teeth, and gleaming eyes, she pointed with outstretched finger to the door, while Biscaros, noticing these indications of wrath upon the young woman's face, was altogether nonplussed, and stood with mouth and eyes wide open. If the young gentleman's absence is such a calamity, he thought, his return would be a blessed thing. I will flatter this worthy nobleman with a hopeful suggestion that he may have a hearty appetite. In pursuance of this determination, Biscaros assumed his most gracious expression, gracefully put his right leg forward, and remarked, After all, though the gentleman is gone, he may return at any moment. The Duke smiled at this beginning. True, he said. Why should he not return? Perhaps, indeed, he has returned already. Go and ascertain Monsieur Biscaros, and let me know. But the breakfast? Said Nanon hastily. I am dying of hunger. To be sure, said the Duke. Cortavos will go. Come here, Cortavos. Go to Master Biscaro's inn and see if Monsieur le Baron de Canoles has returned. If he is not there, ask questions. Find out what you can. Look for him in the neighborhood. I am anxious to breakfast with him. Go. Cortavos left the room, and Biscaros, noticing the embarrassed silence of the others, prepared to put forth a new expedient. Don't you see that Madame is motioning you to retire? Said Francenet. One moment, cried the Duke. Deuce take me, but you're losing your head now, my dear Nanon. What about the menu, pray? I am like you, I am half famished. Here, Master Biscaros, put these 6 louis with the others. They are pay for the diverting tale you have been telling us. Thereupon he bade the historian give place to the cook, and we hasten to say that Master Biscaros shone no less brilliantly in the second role than the first. Meanwhile, Nanon had reflected and realized at a glance the situation in which she was placed if Master Biscaros' supposition were well-founded. In the first place, was it well-founded? And, after all, even if it were, was not Canoles excusable? For what a cruel thing for a gallant fellow like him was this broken appointment. How insulting the espionage of the Duc d'Epernon, and the necessity imposed upon him, Canoles, of looking on, so to speak, at his rival's triumph. Nanon was so deeply in love herself that, attributing this prank to a paroxysm of jealousy, she not only forgave Canoles, but pitied him, and congratulated herself, perhaps, on being loved so well as to have incited him to take this petty revenge upon her. But the evil must be cut off at its root, and the progress of this incipient passion must be checked at all hazards. At that point, a terrifying thought passed through Nanon's mind, and well-nigh struck her dumb. Suppose that this meeting between Canoles and the little gentleman was by appointment. But no, she was mad to think of it, for the little fellow awaited the arrival of a man with mustaches, and was rude Canoles. Perhaps Canoles did not himself detect the stranger's sex until he happened upon the little glove. No matter, Canoles must be thwarted. Summoning all her energy, she returned to the Duke, who had just dismissed Biscaros, laden with compliments and instructions. What a misfortune, monsieur, said she, that madcap's folly deprives him of an honor like that you were about to bestow upon him. If he had been here, his future was assured. His absence may ruin everything. But, said the Duke, if we find him, no danger that, rejoined Nanon. If there's a woman in the case, he will not have returned. What would you have me do, my love? Youth is the age of pleasure. He is young and is amusing himself. But, said Nanon, I am more sensible than he, and it's my opinion that we should interfere a little with his unseasonable amusement. Ah, scolding, sister, cried the Duke. He will take it ill of me at the moment, perhaps, but he will unquestionably thank me for it later. Very well. Have you a plan? I ask nothing better than to adopt it if you have. I have one. Tell it me. Do you not wish to send him to the Queen with urgent intelligence? To be sure, but if he has not returned, send a messenger after him, and as he is on the road to Paris, it will be so much time gained. Pardieu, you are right. Leave it to me, and Canoles shall have the order tonight or tomorrow morning. I will answer for it. Whom will you send? Do you need Cortavos? Not in the least. Give him to me, then, and I will send it with my instructions. Oh, what a head for a diplomatist. You have a future before you, Nanon. May I remain forever under so good a master. That is the height of my ambition, said Nanon, throwing her arm around the old Duke's neck, whereat he trembled with delight. What a delightful joke to play upon our Celadon, said she. It will be a charming story to tell, my love. Upon my word, I should like to go in chase of him myself, to see how he'll receive the messenger. Unhappily, or rather happily, that is out of question, and you must needs remain with me. True, but let us lose no time. Write your order, Duke, and place Cortavos at my disposal. The Duke took a pen and wrote upon a bit of paper these 2 words. Bordeaux, no, and signed his name. He then enclosed this laconic dispatch in an envelope, on which he wrote the following address. To Her Majesty, Queen of Austria, Regent of France. Nanon meanwhile wrote a few lines, which she placed with the other, after showing them to the Duke. My dear Baron, the accompanying dispatch is for Her Majesty the Queen, as you see, on your life. Carry it to her instantly. The welfare of the kingdom is at stake. Your loving sister, Nanon. Nanon had hardly finished the letter when they heard hurried footsteps at the foot of the stairs, and Cortavos ran up quickly and opened the door with the expansive expression of a bearer of news which he knows to be awaited with impatience. Here is Monsieur de Canoles, whom I met within 100 yards of the house, he said. The Duke uttered an exclamation of good-humored surprise. Nanon turned pale and darted to the door, muttering, "It is written that I shall not escape the meeting." At that moment a new personage appeared in the doorway, arrayed in a magnificent costume, holding his hat in his hand, and with most gracious smile upon his lips. Chapter 9. A thunderbolt falling at Nanon's feet would certainly have caused her no greater surprise than this unexpected apparition, and would not, in all probability, have extorted from her a more sorrowful exclamation than that which escaped from her mouth involuntarily. She cried. "To be sure, my dear little sister," replied a most affable voice. "But I beg your pardon," added the owner of the voice, as he espied the Duc d'Epernon. "Perhaps I intrude." He bowed to the ground to the governor of Guyenne, who replied with a gracious gesture. "Cavaignac," muttered Nanon, but so low that the name was pronounced by her heart rather than by her lips. "Welcome, Monsieur de Canoles," said the Duke, with a most benevolent expression. "Your sister and I have done naught but talk of you since last evening, and since last evening we've been most desirous of seeing you." "Ah, you wish to see me?" "Indeed," said Cavaignac, turning to Nanon, with a look in which there was an indescribable expression of irony and suspicion. "Yes," said Nanon. "Monsieur le Duc has been kind enough to express a wish that you should be presented to him." "Naught save the fear of intruding upon you, Monseigneur," said Cavaignac, bowing to the Duke, "has prevented me from seeking that honor before this." "On my word, Baron," said the Duke, "I admire your delicacy, but I feel bound to reproach you for it." "Reproach me for my delicacy, Monseigneur? Oh ho! Yes, for if your good sister had not looked out for your interests—" "Ah!" exclaimed Cavaignac, with an eloquent, reproachful glance at Nanon. "Ah, my good sister has looked out for the interests of Monsieur." "Her brother," interposed Nanon, hastily. "What could be more natural? And then today, to what do I owe the pleasure of seeing you?" "True," said Cavaignac. "To what do you owe the pleasure of seeing me, Monseigneur?" "Why, to chance, to mere chance, which led you to return." "Aha!" said Cavaignac to himself. "It seems that I had gone away." "Yes, you went away, you bad brother, and without letting me know, except by a word or two, which had no other effect than to increase my anxiety. What would you have, dear Nanon?" "We must make allowances for a man in love," said the Duke, with a smile. "Oh ho, this is becoming complicated," said Cavaignac. "It seems now that I am in love." Come," said Nanon, "confess that you are." "I won't deny it," rejoined Cavaignac, with a meaning smile, seeking to glean from somebody some hint of the truth, to guide him in constructing a lusty lie. "Very good," said the Duke, "but let us breakfast, if you've no objection. You can tell us of your love affairs as we sit at the table. Baron, Francenet, a cover for Monsieur de Canoles. You haven't breakfasted, Captain, I trust?" "No, Monseigneur, and I confess that the fresh morning air has sharpened my appetite prodigiously." "Say the night air, you rascal," said the Duke, "for you have been on the road all night." "Faith," muttered Cavaignac, "the brother-in-law guessed it right there. Very good. I admit it, the night air. In that case," the Duke continued, giving his arm to Nanon, and leading the way to the dining room, followed by Cavaignac, "I trust that you will find here the wherewithal to defeat your appetite, however strongly constituted it may be." It was a fact that Master Biscaros had outdone himself. The dishes were not numerous, but delicious and exquisitely served. The yellow wine of Guyenne and the red Burgundy fell from the bottles like golden pearls and cascades of rubies. Cavaignac ate very heartily. "The boy handles his knife and fork very cleverly," said the Duke. "But you do not eat, Nanon." I am no longer hungry, Monseigneur. Dear sister, cried Cavaignac, to think that the pleasure of seeing me has taken away her appetite. Indeed, I can but be grateful to her for loving me so dearly. This chicken wing, Nanon, said the Duke. Give it to my brother, Monseigneur. Give it to my brother, replied Nanon, who saw Cavaignac empty his plate with terrifying rapidity and dreaded his raillery after the food had disappeared. Cavaignac held out his plate with a grateful smile. The Duke placed the wing upon the plate, and Cavaignac replaced the plate on the table before him. Well, what have you been doing that's worth the telling, Canolles? Said the Duke, with a familiarity which seemed to Cavaignac of most hopeful augury. It is understood that I am not speaking of love affairs. Nay, do speak of them, Monseigneur. Speak of them, rejoined the younger man, whose tongue was beginning to be unloosed by successive doses of Medoc and Chamberlain, and who, moreover, was in a very different situation from those people who borrow and name themselves, and that he had no fear of being interfered with by his double. Oh, Monseigneur, he's very skillful at raillery, said Nanon. In that case, we can place him in the same category with the little gentleman, the Duke suggested. Yes, said Nanon, the little gentleman you met last evening. Ah, yes, in the road, said Cavaignac. And afterwards at Master Biscaro's hotel, the Duke added. And afterwards at Master Biscaro's hotel, assented Cavaignac. It's true, by my faith. Do you mean that you really did meet him? Queried Nanon. The little gentleman? Yes. What sort of person was he? Tell us frankly, said the Duke. Egad, replied Cavaignac. He was a charming little fellow, fair and slender and refined, and traveled with a caricature of a squire. It's the same man, said Nanon, biting her lips. And you are in love with him? With whom? With the same little fair, slender, refined gentleman. Oh, Monseigneur, exclaimed Cavaignac, what do you mean? Have you still the pearl-gray glove on your heart? The pearl-gray glove? Yes, the one you were smelling and kissing so passionately last evening. This last phrase removed Cavaignac's perplexity. Ah, he cried. Your little gentleman was a woman, was she? On my word of honor, I suspected as much. There can be no doubt now, murmured Nanon. Give me some wine, sister mine, said Cavaignac. I can't imagine who emptied the bottle that stands beside me, but there's nothing in it. Go to, exclaimed the Duke. His complaint can be cured, as his love doesn't interfere with his eating or drinking, and the king's business will not suffer. The king's business suffer, cried Cavaignac. Never. The king's business first of all. The king's business is sacred. To his majesty's health, Monseigneur. I may rely upon your loyalty, Baron? Upon my loyalty to the king? Yes. I should say you may rely upon it. I would gladly be drawn and quartered for him at times. Your loyalty is easily understood, said Nanon, fearing that, in his enthusiasm for the Medoc and Chamberlain, Cavaignac might forget the part he was playing and clothe himself in his own individuality. Aren't you a captain in his majesty's service, by virtue of Monsieur le Duc's favor? I shall never forget it, said Cavaignac, laying his hand upon his heart with tearful emotion. We will do better, Baron, we will do better hereafter, said the Duke. Thanks, Monseigneur, thanks. And we have already begun. Indeed. Yes, you are too bashful, my young friend, continued D'Epernon. When you are in need of anything, you must come to me. Now that there is no need to beat around the bush, now that you are no longer called upon to conceal your identity, now that I know that you are Nanon's brother. Monseigneur, cried Cavaignac, henceforth I will apply to you in person. You promise? I give you my word. You will do well. Meanwhile, your sister will explain to you what is to be done now. She has a letter to entrust to you in my behalf. Perhaps your fortune is in the missive which I place in your hands on her recommendation. Follow your sister's advice. Young man, follow her advice. She has an active brain, a keen intellect, and a noble heart. Love your sister, Baron, and you will be established in my good graces. Monseigneur, exclaimed Cavaignac effusively, my sister knows how dearly I love her, and that I long for nothing so much as to see her happy, powerful, and rich. Your fervor gratifies me, said the Duke. Pray remain with Nanon, while I go hence to have a reckoning with a certain consummate villain. By the way, Baron, perhaps you may be able to give me some information concerning the scoundrel. Gladly, said Cavaignac. Only it will be necessary for me to know to what scoundrel you refer, Monseigneur. There are many of them, and of every variety in these days. You are right, but this one is one of the most brazen-faced it has ever been my lot to fall in with. Indeed. Imagine, if you please, that the gallows bird extorted my signature in blank, in exchange for the letter your sister wrote you yesterday, which he procured by an infamous deed of violence. A signature in blank. Upon my word. But what interest had you, pray, in possessing the letter of a sister to her brother? Do you forget that I knew nothing of the relationship? Ah, true. And I was idiotic enough. You'll forgive me, won't you, Nanon? Continued the Duke, holding out his hand to the young woman. I was idiotic enough to be jealous of you. Indeed, jealous of me. Oh, Monseigneur, you were very, very wrong. I was about to ask you if you had any suspicion as to the identity of the rascal who played informer. No, not the slightest. But you understand, Monseigneur, that such acts do not go unpunished, and some day you will know who did it. Oh, yes, certainly I shall know it some day, and I have taken precautions in abundance to that end. But I would have preferred to know it immediately. Ah, rejoined Cavaignac, pricking up his ears. Ah, you say you have taken precautions to that end, Monseigneur. Yes, yes, and the villain, continued the Duke, will be very fortunate if my signature in blank doesn't lead to his being hanged. Why, how can you distinguish that particular signature from all the other orders you give out, Monseigneur? Because I made a private mark upon it. A mark? Yes, an invisible mark, which I can render visible with the aid of a chemical process. Well, well, said Cavaignac, that is certainly a most ingenious device, Monseigneur. But you must be careful that he doesn't suspect a trap. Oh, there's no danger of that. Who do you think is likely to tell him of it? True, replied Cavaignac. Not Nanon, surely, nor I? Nor I, said the Duke. Nor you? So you are right, Monseigneur. You cannot fail to know some day who the man is, and then, as I shall have kept my agreement with him, for he will have obtained whatever he chose to use the signature for, I will have him hanged. Amen, said Cavaignac. And now, continued the Duke, as you can give me no information concerning the miscreant. No, Monseigneur, in very truth, I cannot. Never fear, Monseigneur. Adieu to you both. He waved his hand gracefully to Nanon, bestowed a friendly nod upon her brother, and descended the stairs, saying that he should probably return during the day. Nanon went with the Duke to the head of the stairs. Peste, said Cavaignac to himself. My gallant friend did well to warn me. Ah, he's no such fool as he seems. But what shall I do with his signature? Dame, I'll do what I would do with a note. Discount it. Now, monsieur, said Nanon, returning and closing the door behind her. Now, let us understand each other. My dear little sister, Cavaignac replied, I came hither for the purpose of having a talk with you, but in order to talk at our ease, we must be seated. Sit you down, therefore, I beg. As he spoke, he drew a chair near to his own and motioned to Nanon that it was intended for her. Nanon seated herself with a frown, which augured ill for the harmony of the interview. First of all, said she, why are you not where you should be? Ah, my dear little sister, that is hardly courteous. If I were where I should be, I should not be here, and consequently you would not have the pleasure of seeing me. Did you not wish to take orders? No, not I. Say rather that certain persons who are interested in me, notably yourself, wish to force me to take orders. But personally, I have never had a particularly earnest vocation for the church. But you were educated for a religious life? Yes, sister, and I believe I have piously profited by that fact. No sacrilege, monsieur. Do not joke on sacred subjects. I am not joking, dear sister. I am simply stating facts. Look you sent me to the men and brethren at Angoulême to prepare for the priesthood. Well, I studied diligently there. I know Greek like Homer, Latin like Cicero, and theology like John Huss. Having nothing more to learn among those worthy monks, I left their establishment, still following out your wishes, and went to the Carmelites at Rouen to make profession of faith. You forget to say that I had promised you a yearly allowance of 100 pistoles, and that I kept my promise. 100 pistoles for a Carmelite was more than enough, I should say. I don't deny it, my dear sister, but the convent always claimed my allowance on the pretext that I was not yet a Carmelite. Even so, did you not, when you consecrated your life to the church, take a vow of poverty? If I did make such a vow, dear sister, I give you my word that I have faithfully lived up to it. No one was ever poorer than I. But how did you leave the convent? Ah, there you are. In the same way that Adam left the earthly paradise. It was knowledge that undid me, sister. I knew too much. What's that? You knew too much. Yes. Imagine, if you can, that among the Carmelites, who have not the reputation of being Erasmuses or Descartes, I was looked upon as a prodigy of learning, be it understood. The result was that when Monsieur le Duc de Longueville came to Rouen to urge that city to declare in favor of the Parliament, I was sent to harangue Monsieur de Longueville, the which I did in such elegant and well-chosen language, that Monsieur de Longueville not only expressed himself as well pleased with my eloquence, but asked me if I would be his secretary. This happened just as I was about to take the vows. Yes, I remember, and on the pretext that you were saying farewell to the world, you asked me for 100 pistoles, which were given into your own hands. And they are the only ones I received, on the word of a gentleman. But you were to renounce the world. Yes, such was my intention, but such was not the intention of Providence, which probably had other plans for me. It made a different disposition of me through the medium of Monsieur de Longueville. It was not its will that I should remain a monk. I therefore conformed to the will of a merciful Providence, and I am free to say that I do not repent having done so. Then you are no longer in the church? No, not for the moment, at least, my dear sister. I do not dare say that I may not return to it some day. For what man can say today what he will do tomorrow? Has not Monsieur Durance recently founded the Trappist order? Perhaps I shall follow in his footsteps, and found some new order. But for the moment I have dallied with war, you see, and that has made me profane and impure for some time to come. At the first opportunity one shall purify myself. You a fighting man, exclaimed Nanon with a shrug. Why not? Dame, I won't pretend to say that I am a Dunois, a de Guesclin, a Bayard, a knight without fear and without reproach. No, I am not so vainglorious as to claim that I have not some trifling peccadillos to be ashamed of, nor will I ask, like the famous Condottiere Sforza, what fear is. I am a man, and as Plautus says, homo sum iti nihil homini me alienum puto, which means, I am a man, and nothing pertaining to mankind is strange to me. I do know what fear is, therefore, but that does not prevent my being courageous on occasion. I handle a sword or a pistol prettily enough when I am driven to it. But my real bent, my decided vocation, is diplomacy. Unless I am sadly mistaken, my dear Nanon, I am on the way to become a great politician. A fine career is politics. Monsieur de Mazarin will rise very high if he's not hanged. And I am like Monsieur de Mazarin, so that one of my apprehensions, the greatest of them all, in fact, is that I may be hanged. Fortunately, I have you, dear Nanon, and that gives me great confidence. So you are a warrior? And a courtier, too, at need. Ah, my sojourn with Monsieur de Longueville was of the greatest benefit to me. What did you learn when you were with him? What one always learns in the service of princes, to fight, to intrigue, to betray. And those accomplishments raised me to the very highest position, which you have lost. Dame, hasn't Monsieur de Condé lost his? A man can't rule events. Dear sister, I, poor creature that I am, have governed Paris. You? Yes, I. For how long a time? For an hour and 3/4, watch in hand. You governed Paris? With despotic power. How did that come about? In the simplest way imaginable. You must know that Monsieur le Coadjuteur, Monsieur de Gondi, the Abbé de Gondi, was absolute master of the city. Well, at that precise moment, I was in the service of Monsieur le Duc d'Ilboeuf. He is a Lorraine prince, and one need not be ashamed to belong to him. For the time being, Monsieur d'Ilboeuf was at enmity with the coadjutor, so I led an uprising in favor of Monsieur d'Ilboeuf, in the course of which I captured. Whom? The coadjutor? No. I shouldn't have known what to do with him, and should have been much embarrassed. I captured his mistress, Mademoiselle de Chevreuse. Why? That was a terrible thing to do, cried Nanon. Isn't it a terrible thing that a priest should have a mistress? At all events, that's what I said to myself. My purpose was, therefore, to carry her away, and carry her so far that he would never see her again. I sent word to him of my purpose. But the devil of a man uses arguments one can't resist. He offered me 1,000 pistoles. Poor woman, to be thus bargained for. Nonsense. On the contrary, she should have been overjoyed, for that proved how dearly Monsieur de Gondi loved her. None but men of the church are so devoted as all that to their mistresses. I fancy that it's because they are forbidden to have them. You are rich, then? Rich. Of course, after all these acts of brigandage. Don't speak of it. Look you, Nanon, I was most unlucky. Mademoiselle de Chevreuse' maid, whom no one thought of ransoming, and who consequently remained with me, took the money from me. I hope that you retained at least the goodwill of those in whose interest you acted in putting this affront upon the coadjutor. Ah, Nanon, that proves how little you know of princes. Monsieur d'Ilboeuf was reconciled with the coadjutor. In the treaty they entered into, I was sacrificed. I was forced, therefore, to enter the service of Monsieur de Mazarin, who is a contemptible creature, and as the pay was by no means commensurate with the work to be done, I accepted an offer that was made me to incite another immute in honor of Councillor Broussel, the object being to secure the election of the Chancellor Seguier. But my men, the bunglers, only half killed him. In that affray, I was in greater danger than ever before threatened me. Monsieur de la Meilleraie fired a pistol at me almost point blank. Luckily, I stooped in time. The bullet whistled over my head, and the illustrious marshal killed no one but an old woman. What a tissue of horrors! Exclaimed Nanon. Why, no, dear sister, simply the necessities of civil war. I can understand that a man capable of such things might have dared to do what you did yesterday. What did I do, pray? Queried Cavaignac with the most innocent expression. What did I dare? You dare to throw dust in the eyes of so eminent a man as Monsieur d'Epernon. But what I cannot understand, and would never believe, is that a brother, fairly laden with favors at his sister's hands, could in cold blood form a plan to ruin that sister. Ruin my sister? I, said Cavaignac. Yes, you, retorted Nanon. I had no need to wait for the tale you have just told me, which proves that you are capable of anything, to recognize the handwriting of this letter. Tell me, do you deny that this unsigned letter was written by you? And Nanon indignantly held before her brother's eyes a denunciating letter the Duke had handed her the night before. Cavaignac read it composedly. Well, said he, what have you to say against this letter? Is it not couched in well-turned phrase? If you thought so, I should be very sorry for you, for it would prove that your literary taste is vitiated. This is not a question of the composition, monsieur, but of the fact itself. Did you, or did you not write this letter? Unquestionably I did. If I had proposed to deny the fact, I should have disguised my handwriting. But it was useless. I have never intended to hide it from you. Indeed, I was anxious that you should recognize the letter as coming from me. Oh, exclaimed Nanon with a horrified gesture, you admit it! It is a last relic of humility, dear sister. Yes, I may as well tell you that I was actuated by a desire for revenge. Revenge? Yes, most naturally. Revenge upon me, you wretch. Pray, consider what you're saying. What injury have I ever done you that the thought of seeking revenge should enter your mind? What have you done to me? Ah, Nanon, put yourself in my place. I left Paris because I had too many enemies there. 'Tis the misfortune of all men who dabble in politics. I returned to you. I implored you. Do you remember? You received 3 letters. You won't say that you did not recognize my hand. It's precisely the same as in this anonymous letter, and furthermore, those letters were signed. I wrote you 3 letters, begging for 100 beggarly pistoles. 100 pistoles. To you, who had millions, it was the merest trifle. But 100 pistoles, as you know, is my favorite figure. Very good. My sister ignored me. I presented myself at my sister's house. My sister's door was closed in my face. Naturally, I made inquiries. Perhaps she is in want, I said to myself. If so, this is a time to show her that her benefactions have not fallen on stony soil. Perhaps she is no longer free. In that case, her treatment of me is pardonable. You see, my heart sought excuses for you, until I learned that my sister was free, happy, wealthy, and rich. Rich, richer, richest. And that one bear to Canol's, a stranger, had usurped my privileges and was enjoying her protection in my place. Thereupon jealousy turned my head. Say, cupidity, you sold me to Monsieur d'Epernon, as you sold Mademoiselle de Chevreuse to the coadjutor. What business was it of yours, I pray to know, that I was on friendly terms with Monsieur le Baron de Canol's? What business was it of mine? None at all, and I should not even have thought of interfering, if you had continued to be on friendly terms with me. Do you know that if I were to say a single word to Monsieur d'Epernon, if I should tell him the whole truth, you would be lost? Certainly. You heard with your own ears from his mouth a moment since what fate is in store for the man who extorted that signature in blank from him. Don't speak of it. I shudder to the very marrow of my bones, and it needed all my self-control to prevent me from betraying myself. And you say that you do not tremble now, although you confess your acquaintance with fear? No, for such an open confession on your part would show that Monsieur Canol's is not your brother, and that note of yours, being addressed to a stranger, would take on very sinister meaning. It is much better, believe me, to have made the disingenuous confession you have made, ungrateful sister. I dare not say blindly. I know you too well for that. But consider, pray, how many advantages, all foreseen by me, result from this little episode, for which all the credit is due to my thoughtfulness. In the first place, you were greatly embarrassed and dreaded the arrival of Monsieur de Canol's, who, not having been warned, would have floundered around terribly in the midst of your little family romance. My presence, on the other hand, has made everything smooth. Your brother is no longer a mystery. Monsieur d'Epernon has adopted him, and in a very flattering way, I am bound to say. Now, therefore, the brother is under no further necessity of skulking in corners. He is one of the family. Ergo, correspondence, appointments without and why not within, provided always that the brother with black eyes and hair is careful not to come face to face with Monsieur d'Epernon. One cloak bears an astonishing resemblance to another. Deuce take it. And when Monsieur d'Epernon sees a cloak leave your house, who is to tell him whether it is or is not a brother's cloak? So there you are, free as the wind. But to do you this service, I have unbaptized myself. My name is Canol's, and that's a nuisance. You ought to be grateful to me for the sacrifice. Nanon was struck dumb by this resistless flood of eloquence, the fruit of inconceivable impudence, and she could think of no arguments to oppose to it. Carvignac made the most of his victory and continued, "And now, dear sister, as we are united once more after so long a separation, as you have found a real brother after so many disappointments, confess that henceforth you will sleep in peace, thanks to the shield which love stretches over you. You will lead as tranquil a life as if all Guyenne adored you, which is not precisely the fact, you know. But Guyenne must bend to our will. In short, I have taken my station at your threshold. Monsieur d'Epernon procures a colonel's commission for me. Instead of 6 men, I have 2,000. With those 2,000 men, I will perform again the 12 tasks of Hercules. I shall be created duke and peer. Madame d'Epernon dies. Monsieur d'Epernon marries you. Before all this happens, you must do 2 things, said Nanon shortly. What are they, dear sister? Tell me, I am listening. First of all, you must return the Duke's signature in blank to him. Otherwise, you will be hanged. You heard your sentence from his own lips. Secondly, you must leave this house instantly, or not only am I ruined forever, for which you care nothing, but you'll be involved in my ruin, a consideration which will cause you to think twice, I trust, before you decide. These are my answers, dear lady. The signature in blank is my property, and you can't prevent my getting myself hanged, if such is my good pleasure. God forbid. Thanks. I shall do nothing of the kind, never fear. I declared my aversion to that kind of death a few moments since. I shall keep the document, therefore, unless you have a craving to purchase it from me, in which case we may come to terms. I have no use for it. I give them away. Lucky Nanon. You will keep it, then? Yes. At the risk of what may happen to you? Don't be alarmed. I have a place for it. As to taking my leave, I should make no such blunder, being here by the Duke's invitation. Furthermore, in your desire to be rid of me, you forget one thing. What is that? The important commission the Duke mentioned, which is likely to make my fortune. Nanon turned pale. Why? You know perfectly well that it was not intended for you, she said. You know that to abuse your present position would be a crime, for which you would have to pay the penalty one day or another. For that reason, I don't propose to abuse it. I am anxious to use it, nothing more. Besides, Monsieur de Canolles is named in the commission. Very good. Am I not Baron de Canolles? Yes, but his face, as well as his name, is known at court. Monsieur de Canolles has been there several times. A la bonne heure, that's a strong argument. It's the first you put forward, and you see that I yield to it. Moreover, you might fall in with your political opponents there, said Nanon, and perhaps your face, although under a different name, is as well known as Monsieur de Canolles. Oh, that would amount to nothing if, as the Duke says, the mission is destined to result advantageously to France. The message will be the messenger's safeguard. A service of such importance implies pardon for him who renders it, and amnesty for the past is always the first condition of political conversions. And so, dear sister, it is not for you, but for me to impose conditions. Well, what are yours? In the first place, as I was saying, the first condition of every treaty, general amnesty. Is that all? Secondly, the adjustment of our accounts. It would seem that I owe you something, then. You owe me the 100 pistoles, which you inhumanly refused me. Here are 200. Good. I recognize the real Nanon in that. But I give them to you on one condition. What is that? That you repair the wrong you have done. That is no more than fair. What must I do? You must take horse and ride along the Paris road until you overtake Monsieur de Canolles. In that case, I lose his name. You restore it to him. And what am I to say to him? You will hand him this order and make sure that he sets out instantly to execute it. Is that all? Absolutely. Is it necessary that he should know who I am? On the contrary, it is of the utmost importance that he should not know. Ah, Nanon, do you blush your brother? Nanon did not reply. She was lost in thought. How can I be sure, she began after a moment's silence, that you will do my errand faithfully? If you held anything sacred, I would require your oath. You can do better than that. How? Promise me 100 more pistoles after the errand is done. It's a bargain, said Nanon with a shrug. Mark the difference. I ask you for no oath, and your simple word is enough for me. We will say 100 pistoles to the man who hands you from me Monsieur de Canolles' receipt. Yes, but you speak of a third person. Do you not expect to return yourself? Who knows? I have business myself which requires my presence in the neighborhood of Paris. Nanon could not restrain an exclamation of delight. Ah, that's not polite, said Cavaignac with a laugh. But never mind, dear sister, no malice. Agreed, but to horse. Instantly. Simply time to drink a stirrup cup. Cavaignac emptied the bottle of Chambertin into his glass, saluted his sister deferentially, vaulted into the saddle, and disappeared in a cloud of dust.